here's a truth most people simply don't grasp. By early 1943, Germany's fate in the war was already sealed. The mathematical odds of victory had irrevocably turned against them. Yet, this grim reality was never communicated to the soldiers on the front lines. For 2 more agonizing years, millions of young men continued to fight, to die, clinging to desperate hopes for miracle weapons and final, decisive victories that would never materialize. Tonight, we're going to immerse ourselves in the experience of one such soldier. Oh, and before I forget, a listener from Chicago commented last time, mentioning it was 2 a.m. their time, followed by a good morning from someone in London. It still amazes me, the thought of all of you tuning in simultaneously from such vastly different corners of the globe. If you're new to this, please stay with us. So, the setting is February 1943, on the Eastern Front. And I must caution you, this narrative delves into some profoundly heavy territory. Not in a way that will disturb your sleep, perhaps, but certainly in a manner that feels starkly, uncomfortably real. Now try to picture this. You are Wilhelm, a German soldier, just 22 years old, and you're being roused from a fitful sleep by the distant rumble of artillery. It's not close enough to claim your life, not yet, but near enough that the frozen earth beneath your back shudders with each concussive impact. Your makeshift bed is inside what remains of a farmhouse. The roof is mostly gone, half its walls reduced to rubble, yet the cellar, where you huddle with 11 other men, remains largely intact. The blanket you're wrapped in is rigid with frost. You slept in your boots, as removing them risks immediate frostbite, and frostbite means amputation, which in turn means your life as you know it, is effectively over. Your breath, heavy and shallow, emerges in white clouds, momentarily suspended in the dark, cold air before slowly vanishing. Somewhere in the darkness, a man coughs, a wet, rattling sound that immediately signals either bronchitis or something far more sinister. Tuberculosis, a silent, dreaded killer, has been weaving its insidious path through the ranks, a whisper of a threat nobody dares to acknowledge. Men simply vanish, sent to field hospitals that are, in grim truth, little more than collection points for the dying. This is February 1943. Only 2 weeks prior, the entire 6th Army had surrendered at Stalingrad. 91,000 German soldiers marched into Soviet captivity, the vast majority of whom would never survive the camps. The official radio broadcasts declared it a heroic sacrifice, a testament to their struggle. But you knew the real story. You heard the unvarnished truth from the few, traumatized men who miraculously managed to escape the encirclement before it tightened its grip. The horrific tales of soldiers resorting to eating horses, then rats, then other unspeakable things that no one dares to articulate. 300,000 Germans had entered Stalingrad. Only 91,000 emerged as prisoners. The grim arithmetic reveals approximately 200,000 dead in a single city, over a single brutal winter. And the chilling truth is, your mind cannot truly process that scale of horror. Numbers so vast cease to hold any real meaning. Your brain simply refuses to visualize 200,000 corpses. So instead, you let your thoughts drift to Hans, from your training platoon, who was dispatched to the 6th Army last autumn. You find yourself wondering if he's among the dead, or the captured, or if, by some incredible miracle, he's warm somewhere right now. You don't know. You probably never will. The man beside you stirs. His name is Eric, a 34-year-old former accountant from Hamburg. Before the war, he spent his days meticulously calculating taxes and his evenings listening to jazz records with his wife. Now, his days are consumed by the grim mathematics of ammunition ratios, and his nights are a desperate struggle to suppress the screams that threaten to erupt from his sleep. You, the listener, are on your pillow right now, safe, warm, perhaps with a glass of water on your nightstand. Take a moment to truly absorb the profound contrast between your reality and Wilhelm's. They are different worlds, different existences. The cellar air hangs heavy with the cloying sense of unwashed men, damp wool, and something else, something sickly sweet and medicinal, likely gangrene. One of the new replacements, a young man named Udo, took shrapnel to his leg 3 days ago, and the wound is clearly not healing. The medic did his best, but supplies are desperately low. Everything is low: food, ammunition, and most critically, hope. Here's what they conveniently omit from the stories about the Eastern Front in 1943. They don't tell you about the cold, a relentless, pervasive chill that seeps into your very bones until you can no longer recall what warmth truly feels like. It plunges to minus 30 degrees, even minus 40 degrees on the worst nights. Your rifle freezes solid. The lubricating oil in its mechanisms congeals into a thick, unusable glue. You are forced to urinate on the bolt action just to generate enough heat to make it function. And yes, that is a real, documented truth. Soldiers urinating on their weapons was often the only way to coax a single shot from them. They certainly don't tell you about the food situation. Officially, your daily ration is supposed to include bread, sausage, and a warm cup of ersatz coffee. In reality, you receive only whatever meager provisions the supply trucks manage to get through, which, lately, hasn't been much at all. The main road was bombed again, or perhaps sabotaged by partisans. It's difficult to tell the difference anymore. Either way, the devastating result is the same: empty bellies, weakened men, soldiers dividing a single tin of meat among 4 of them and bravely pretending it's sufficient. The offensive in the Caucasus, codenamed Operation Blue, the massive push for the oil fields at Baku, had failed spectacularly. Germany desperately needed that oil. Their tanks guzzled fuel with insatiable thirst, their trucks, their planes, everything ran on petroleum, and Germany had been running on empty for months. The grand plan was to seize the vast Soviet oil fields and resolve their critical shortage. Instead, the army became bogged down, dangerously overextended, their supply lines stretched thin as taffy until they inevitably snapped. And then, Stalingrad happened. Heavy footsteps echo on the cellar stairs, signaling someone's descent. The silhouette of Feldwebel Kraus materializes in the doorway. He is 47, a hardened veteran of the previous conflict, the one they used to call the Great War. Before this current hellscape made it seem like a mere prelude. "Wake up," he states, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, almost dead. "We're moving in 30 minutes. No one questions where. No one asks why. These days, orders are simply handed down from some unseen authority, and you follow them, for the alternative is a firing squad for desertion. The High Command in Berlin has made that grim directive abundantly clear: no retreats without explicit permission. Hold your ground, or die trying. And countless men have indeed died trying. You haul yourself upright, every joint in your body protesting with aches and stiffness. At 22 years old, you move with the creaking slowness of an old man, like your grandfather once did. The war ages you at an accelerated, almost unimaginable pace. Men who arrived at the front just 6 months ago, looking like fresh-faced boys, now possess the hollow, distant eyes of the elderly, as if they have already witnessed the absolute end of everything and are simply waiting for their physical bodies to catch up. The critical thing about this particular moment in the war, February of 43, is that it was when the first irreparable cracks began to show. Not merely on the front lines, but within the entire edifice, the very system, everything Germany had so meticulously constructed since 1933. The 1,000-year Reich, destined to endure forever, was, after barely a decade, already beginning its agonizing collapse. Just 2 days prior, Joseph Goebbels delivered a fiery speech in Berlin, at the Sportpalast. Thousands of people packed into that grand hall, eager to hear the propaganda minister explain why everything unfolding was, in fact, perfectly fine. Why it was all part of a larger, brilliant plan. Why it was, in reality, a justification for even greater sacrifice. Total war! That was his resounding message. Do you want total war? And the crowd roared back in unison. Yes! Thousands of voices bellowing their fervent approval for a concept that fundamentally meant every single person and every single resource would now be completely dedicated to the war effort. No exceptions, no civilian life, just war. Total, absolute war. You, of course, did not hear the speech yourself. You were here, obviously, in this frozen hellscape, watching rats gnaw at corpses that no one had the energy to bury. But you heard about it. Word travels, even to this desolate place. 15,000 people in that hall, apparently, rose to their feet, cheering, applauding, demanding more sacrifice, more death, more war. You can't help but wonder if any of them have ever witnessed what a man looks like after a Katyusha rocket has ripped him inside out. You wonder if they've ever heard the agonizing sound a soldier makes when frostbite claims his feet, and he fully comprehends that he will never walk again. You wonder if they would still be cheering then. Probably not. But that is the insidious nature of propaganda. It thrives most effectively on those who have yet to confront the unvarnished truth. Once you've seen it, once you've lived it, all those grand speeches, those catchy slogans, those lofty promises, they all begin to sound exactly like what they are, carefully crafted lies, spun by men in warm, safe offices to men dying in frozen fields. Outside the cellar, the sky is that specific, ominous shade of gray that portends more snow. The landscape stretches flat and endless, a stark white in every direction until the whiteness blurs into a haze that might be fog, or perhaps just the point where the world ceases to render properly, like a video game that hasn't quite loaded its distant textures. There's a burnout T-34 tank approximately 200 meters to the east. You killed its crew 3 days ago when they attempted to flank your position. 3 men, just boys really, likely the same age as you. They are still inside, frozen solid by now. No one has bothered to retrieve them. What would be the point? The cruel irony is that just 1 year ago, everything had seemed possible. The army had reached the very gates of Moscow, the Volga, the Caucasus. The swastika flew defiantly over half of Europe, North Africa, the Balkans, France, Poland, Denmark, Norway. The map of German conquest was a dizzying, nightmarish vision of empire. The Allies had attempted a raid on the French coast at Dieppe back in August, thousands of Canadian soldiers, meant as a test for a future invasion. The Germans had utterly slaughtered them on the beaches, hurled them back into the churning sea as if they were mere debris. For a time, it genuinely seemed as though the Reich was truly invincible, as if the propaganda might, just might, have been telling the truth. And now, look at it all. The retreat from the Caucasus is still underway. Hundreds of thousands of men are dragging themselves back through treacherous mud and snow, abandoning the very oil fields they were sent to capture. Leaving behind tanks, trucks, and equipment for which there is no fuel left to move. Leaving behind the dead in unmarked graves, because there wasn't even time for that. Your unit is part of Army Group South, or what's left of it. The mission parameters shift constantly. Hold this position. Fall back to that one. Reinforce this sector. No one, it seems, has a coherent plan anymore. Not a real one. Only desperate reactions, improvisation, a frenzied scrambling to plug holes in a dam that has already catastrophically burst. 30 minutes, Krauss had said. That means packing whatever gear you can physically carry. It means checking your rifle one last time, ensuring it will actually fire when your life depends on it. It means consuming whatever meager rations you have left, because there's no telling when, or if, you'll get more. Eric is carefully stuffing something into his pack, a small photograph, wrapped in a piece of cloth. His wife, most likely. Perhaps his children. He rarely speaks of them. Perhaps it's too painful. Or perhaps, in some subconscious way, he believes he's protecting them by not uttering their names in this hellish place, as if acknowledging their existence might somehow draw the malevolent attention of whatever dark force is orchestrating this entire catastrophe. The man with the infected leg, Udo, is not getting up. His face is the color of old, waxy cheese, slick with sweat despite the bone-chilling cold. The gangrene has spread. You can smell it even from across the cellar, that sickeningly sweet, putrid odor that signifies dying tissue, cells surrendering. He is staying. Krauss says. Someone's coming for him. Everyone knows precisely what that euphemism implies. Someone coming for him means a stretcher bearer if he's incredibly lucky, a bullet if he's not. The army can no longer afford to carry men who cannot walk. Not anymore. There once were standards, protocols, a form of medical care that genuinely aimed at keeping soldiers alive. Now, it's triage on a civilizational scale. Everyone is prioritized solely by their usefulness. Dead weight is mercilessly cut. Udo doesn't protest, doesn't beg. He simply lies there, staring blankly at the low ceiling with those empty eyes that seem to have already accepted the inevitable. Perhaps he's relieved. Many men reach that breaking point, the moment where dying seems a far easier option than continuing. You don't say goodbye. No one does. What, truly, would you say? Outside, the cold assaults you like a physical entity, like walking headfirst into a solid wall of ice. Your lungs burn with each ragged breath. The moisture inside your nostrils freezes almost instantaneously. Your exposed skin, what little there is, immediately begins to sting with needle-like pain. 11 men file out of the cellar and into the swirling snow. Feldwebel Kraus leads the way, followed by you, then Eric, then the others. Names you've learned, forgotten, and learned again. Men who were complete strangers just 6 months ago and are now closer to you than any family. Men who have witnessed you cry, scream, and vomit, and yet somehow still treat you like a human being. This is your war. This is the Eastern Front in February 1943. 2 agonizing years into an invasion that was originally projected to take a mere 6 weeks. 2 years of relentlessly fighting an enemy that simply refuses to die, no matter how many you kill. 2 years of watching friends disappear into the vast, white void of Russia, never to return. Somewhere to the west, 1,000 kilometers away, Hitler sits in his headquarters, moving tiny pins across a map, drafting new plans, issuing new orders, utterly convinced that if he just pushes hard enough, sacrifices enough men, the entire situation will somehow magically reverse itself. It won't. But you don't know that yet. Nobody does. Not for certain anyway. And still, in February of 43, there remains a flicker of hope. Desperate, irrational, yet hope nonetheless. The new tanks they're building, the formidable Tiger, the sleek Panther, they'll undoubtedly change everything. The wonder weapons, the top secret projects. Any day now, they'll unveil something truly revolutionary, something that will unequivocally turn the tide of this war. That's what they tirelessly keep telling you anyway. The column begins to move out. Single file, weapons held ready. Every man meticulously watching a different sector, because enemy snipers are everywhere. And you never know when a figure clad in white camouflage will suddenly emerge from a snowdrift and begin firing. Where are we going? Eric whispers, now walking beside you, his voice barely audible. East, Kraus responds without even turning around. Reinforcing something or other. East. Towards the enemy. Away from home. Deeper into the frozen, relentless nightmare that has already swallowed countless men before you. The direction no one ever wants to go. The direction that leads to places like Stalingrad. You adjust your grip on your rifle. You put one foot deliberately in front of the other. You fix your gaze on the back of the man ahead of you and try desperately not to think about anything beyond the very next step. This is survival. This is what it truly looks like. Not heroics, not glory, not some grand noble cause. Just the grim, repetitive act of placing one frozen boot in front of the other, and praying the artillery shells miss, and the snipers miss, and that the bone-deep cold doesn't claim your life before the enemy gets a chance. And somewhere in Berlin, in a brightly lit hall filled with cheering civilians, Goebbels is still asking if they want total war. Yes! They scream. Yes, we want it! They want it without truly knowing what it means, without remotely comprehending the unimaginable cost. You could tell them you've seen the receipts, but nobody is asking you. The column slowly disappears into the white expanse. 11 figures, growing smaller and smaller, until they are mere dark specks against the endless snow. Heading east, toward the war that stubbornly refuses to end. Toward the death that is patiently waiting for so many of them. Toward the final, brutal chapter of something that should have concluded long ago, but somehow just keeps going and going and going. 5 months pass, and against all odds, you are still alive. It is July now, 1943. And the bitter cold that very nearly killed you in February has been replaced by something almost worse, an oppressive, suffocating heat. The kind that settles on your chest like a crushing weight. The The kind that makes the air shimmer and dance over the flat, featureless Russian steppe until you can no longer distinguish what is real from what is merely a mirage. 40 degrees, someone mentioned. 40 degrees Celsius, which for our American listeners translates to approximately 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Either way, it feels obscene. You are sweating through your uniform before the sun even fully clears the horizon. By midday, your tunic is completely soaked. By evening, you reek like something that crawled out of a swamp and died. Wilhelm, yes, that's still you. Still 22 years old, though you feel about 50 now. You've been moved around so constantly in the last few months that you've completely lost track of your exact location. Somewhere near a city called Kursk, deep within Soviet territory. A significant bulge in the front line that, on a strategic map, looks unsettlingly like a malignant tumor. High Command wants to cut it out. They're calling it Operation Citadel. The big summer. The grand offensive. The one hailed as the turning point, destined to change everything. A promise, of course, you'd heard many times before. Eric, for instance, remains by your side. The accountant from Hamburg. He's thinner now, they all are. 5 brutal months of meager war rations will inevitably strip a man bare. His cheeks have become gaunt, hollowed out by hunger, and his eyes bear a permanent squint, as if perpetually gazing into an unbearable glare, even in the dimmest light. Yet he is alive, a grim testament to survival, placing him among the fortunate, considering nearly 40% of the men who began the year in your unit are now gone. The replacements, mere boys, keep arriving, mostly 18 or 19 years old, fresh from German training camps where they were taught the finer points of marching in perfectly straight lines and executing a crisp salute. Such parade ground discipline, however, offers little solace or protection when a Soviet shell detonates a mere 3 meters away, instantly obliterating your squad leader into a fine red mist. Still, they learn quickly, these new arrivals, at least the ones who managed to survive their first terrifying week. Here's what Command isn't telling you: the Soviets know you're coming. They've known for months. British intelligence, it turns out, had cracked the German codes long ago, and they've been meticulously feeding every scrap of critical information to Moscow as if it were an endless, open buffet. Every meticulous plan, every troop movement, every agonizing delay while the factories back home struggled to churn out enough of those new Panther tanks that were supposed to change everything. Ah, the Panthers. God, don't even get me started on the Panthers. On paper, they are truly incredible machines, sloped armor designed to deflect incoming rounds, a high-velocity main gun, fast, and remarkably maneuverable. They were supposed to be the ultimate answer to the Soviet T-34, a tank that has haunted German tankers' nightmares since '41. On paper, that is. In reality, they are cursed by incessant breakdowns. The transmissions consistently fail. The engines overheat with alarming regularity. One panzer commander confided that his battalion lost 16 tanks to mechanical failure before they even reached the start line. Not to enemy fire, mind you, but simply to their own inherent flaws. 16 state-of-the-art tanks, rendered utterly useless, abandoned in fields because nobody back in Germany bothered to test them properly before rushing them to the front. But the offensive is happening anyway. Hitler demands it. Hitler needs it. A decisive victory here might just convince a skeptical world that Germany still possesses its formidable strength. It might convince the German people that all their immeasurable sacrifice has, in fact, been worth it. And perhaps, most desperately, it might convince Hitler himself that he hasn't made a catastrophic, irreversible mistake. So here you are, July 4th, the night before it all begins, sitting in a trench that reeks of sweat, diesel, and raw fear, watching the sun bleed across the horizon over wheat fields that, by tomorrow, will be churned into a gruesome landscape of mud, blood, and burning metal. Eric is writing a letter. He does that sometimes. He never sends them, though. There's no mail service out here, not anymore. He just writes and writes, then carefully folds the paper into his breast pocket, joining all the others. A growing stack of unsent words, getting thicker with each passing week. What are you telling her this time? You ask. That I love her, he says, not looking up. That I think about her every single night. That the sunflowers here look just like the ones in her mother's garden. There are no sunflowers anywhere near your position, but you don't say that. Let him have his poetry. Let him have something. The artillery starts at dawn. Not yours. Theirs. The Soviets have been watching and waiting, and now they're unleashing hell on the German assembly areas with everything they've got. Shells scream overhead, a cacophony of whistling death. Explosions walk across the landscape like the ground-shaking footsteps of angry gods. Men dive frantically for cover. Tanks button up, their hatches slamming shut. Chaos reigns even before the battle properly begins. This isn't how it was supposed to go. You were supposed to have the element of surprise. You were supposed to catch them off guard. Instead, they're catching you. But the offensive goes forward anyway because orders are orders, and the Führer has spoken, and nobody in high command possesses the courage to tell him this is sheer madness. You go over the top at 0600, running, stumbling, trying desperately to keep your head down while bullets crack past your ears, sounding like whip snaps. The wheat is tall enough to offer some concealment, but it's also tall enough to hide the enemy. Every shadow could be death waiting to happen. A man next to you goes down. You don't know his name, one of the replacements who arrived only 3 days ago. Gone now. Just like that. A wet, sickening sound, and then nothing. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't think. Just move. The Soviets have constructed defenses here that defy comprehension. Trenches layered 8 deep. Minefields stretching for kilometers. Artillery positions camouflaged so meticulously you don't see them until they're already firing. Anti-tank guns dug in with overlapping fields of fire. Everything planned. Everything prepared. They've had months to get ready, and they've used every single day. You heard later that they laid over 1 million mines around Kursk. 1 million! That's not a typo. 1 million explosive devices buried in the dirt, waiting for German boots and German tank treads. The sheer math of that is just... I mean, how do you even begin to comprehend it? The first day is bad. The second is worse. By the third, you've stopped counting the dead because the numbers are too soul-crushing. And anyway, there's simply no time. Sleep when you can steal a moment. Eat when there's food available. Shoot at anything that moves on the other side of the line. Try not to dwell on the unsettling fact that somewhere out there, Soviet soldiers are doing exactly the same thing. Young men, scared men, men who probably didn't ask for this any more than you did. The tanks are where the real horror resides. You're infantry, so you're not trapped inside those steel coffins, but you're close enough to witness what happens when they brew up. Close enough to hear the screams. AT-34 round punches cleanly through the armor of a Panzer IV about 50 meters from your position, and the whole thing just erupts in a cataclysm of fire. Ammunition cooks off, fuel ignites, blasting the hatches open. Men come scrambling out, engulfed in flames, burning alive, rolling desperately in the dirt, trying to extinguish infernal fires that simply won't go out. One of them manages maybe 10 steps before he collapses, a charred husk. The others don't make it out at all. You throw up right there in the trench. Nothing much comes out because you haven't eaten since yesterday, but your body tries anyway. Eric puts a hand on your shoulder and doesn't say anything, because what is there to say? That night you can't sleep. Not because of the incessant guns, you've grown accustomed to those somehow, but because every time you close your eyes, you see that tanker burning. See him running. See him falling. Your bed right now is soft and safe and quiet. Try to hold on to that for a second. The stark difference between here and there. The thing about war that nobody ever truly prepares you for is the smell. Not just death, though that's bad enough. But everything else too. Cordite, diesel, burning rubber, hot metal. Fear has a smell too. Sharp and sour. A whole trench full of men who haven't bathed in weeks and are all terrified out of their minds. It permeates your clothes, your hair, your very skin. You start to wonder if you'll ever smell normal again. One of the replacements, a kid named Jürgen from Bavaria. He keeps a faded photograph of his mother in his helmet liner, taking it out every night and staring at it as if trying to memorize every contour of her face. He's 17, lied about his age to enlist. Thought it would be an adventure. Thought he'd be home by Christmas, just like the recruiting posters so glibly promised. He stops taking out the photograph after day 4. Something in his eyes goes flat, lifeless. The adventure is definitively over. Now, it's just survival. The battle grinds on for days, then weeks. German forces push forward, Soviets push back, ground gained and lost and gained again in a brutal, bloody cycle. Villages change hands 3 times in a single afternoon. The wheat fields you advanced through on day 1 are flattened now, utterly crushed under tank treads and artillery impacts until they're nothing but a sea of mud. Everything is mud. Mud and smoke and the constant, deafening thunder of guns. Somewhere in the middle of all this, perhaps July 12th, the tanks meet. Not in your sector, but close enough that you can hear it, feel it, the very ground shaking like an earthquake that simply won't stop. Hundreds of tanks converging on a place called Prokhorovka. German Panthers and Tigers pitted against Soviet T-34s. Point-blank range in some cases, tanks literally ramming into each other because the dust and smoke are so thick nobody can see more than a few meters. Picture it. Really picture it. A wheat field the size of a small city, golden stalks swaying gently in the July heat. And then 1,500 tanks pouring into that field from both sides. Engines screaming, cannons firing, men burning. The largest armored battle in human history. The wheat catches fire. The tanks keep coming. The dead pile up inside their machines like sardines in a burning can. You don't see it directly. You just hear the distant thunder, and watch the smoke rise on the horizon and know that something unspeakably terrible is happening over there. Something that will fill history books someday, if anyone survives to write them. By July 15th, the offensive is stalling, grinding to a halt. The Germans have pushed maybe 30 kilometers into the Soviet lines at the deepest point. 30 kilometers. That's it. Thousands dead for 30 kilometers of churned-up farmland that doesn't matter strategically, and never did. And then the news finally comes down. The Allies have landed in Sicily. Italy is under imminent threat. Hitler needs to pull forces from the Eastern Front to deal with this new, pressing crisis in the Mediterranean. Operation Citadel is over. Just like that. All those men, all that equipment, all those meticulously crafted plans and preparations and promises of victory, done. Cancelled. The great summer offensive that was supposed to change everything has changed nothing except the casualty lists. Your unit pulls back to defensive positions. The retreat isn't panicked. Not yet. But there's something different in the air now. Something that feels unmistakably like defeat, even if nobody's willing to say the word out loud. Eric tears up his latest letter without sending it. He crumples the paper into a tight ball and throws it into a fire pit, watching it burn to ash. What was that? You ask. Lies, he says. Just lies. The summer drags on, endlessly. The Soviets counterattack. German forces fall back, then fall back again, relentlessly. Cities that took weeks of brutal fighting to capture in 41 are lost in mere days. The momentum has decisively shifted, and everyone can feel it, even if the propaganda broadcasts keep insisting that everything is fine and victory is just around the corner. You dig trenches, lay wire, set up machine gun positions. The offensive army has transformed into a defensive one almost overnight. No more dreams of Moscow. No more dreams of the Caucasus oil fields. Now it's just holding on. Trying to keep what you've got. Trying not to lose any more ground than you absolutely have to. Feldwebel Kraus gets killed in August. A sniper. One clean shot through the throat. He was in mid-sentence, talking about his daughter's wedding, the one he was supposed to attend next spring. And then, just gone. Blood everywhere. The words dying in his mouth along with everything else. You don't cry. You've long forgotten how. There's just this hollow space where the grief should be. A numbness that settles over everything like a heavy blanket of snow. Maybe that's what survival looks like now. Feeling nothing, because feeling anything would surely break you. New orders come down in September. Fall back to the Dnieper River. Establish a defensive line. Hold at all costs. The Dnieper. That's deep in Ukraine. That's giving up everything gained in 42. That's admitting, without actually saying the words, that the war in the East has irrevocably turned against you. You march west, away from Kursk, away from the countless graves of men you knew, away from the burned-out tanks and the flattened wheat fields and the pervasive smell of death that hangs over everything like a perpetual fog. The roads are clogged with retreating troops, trucks and horse-drawn wagons and men on foot, all heading the same direction. West. Away. The legendary organization that made the German army famous has started to fray at the edges. Units mixed together, their cohesion lost. Officers separated from their men. Supply columns that took wrong turns and ended up in Soviet-held territory. You pass through villages that are empty now. The civilians have either fled, or were evacuated, or suffered something far worse. Houses with doors hanging open, swaying idly. Gardens going to seed untended. Chickens wander aimlessly in the streets, with nobody left to feed them. Ghost towns where life used to happen, and now doesn't. In one such village, you find an old woman sitting on her porch, just sitting there, watching the broken army retreat past her home. She doesn't run, doesn't hide, just watches with eyes that have seen too much already and can't be shocked by anything anymore. Eric gives her a piece of bread from his meager rations. She takes it without a word, nods once, and goes back to watching. What's she waiting for? You ask him later. The end, he says. Same as all of us. Behind you, the Soviets advance. Slowly at first, then faster, sensing weakness, sensing blood in the water. 3 million of them, or more. An endless tide of men and machines pouring west. And you're just trying to stay ahead of it. One foot in front of the other. Same as always, same as February, same as it's been since this whole nightmare started. Eric walks beside you, silent. His stack of unsent letters is gone now, burned or buried or lost somewhere in the chaos of the retreat. He doesn't write anymore. Doesn't talk much either. Just marches. You both do. West toward Germany, west toward home, west toward whatever comes next. Because this isn't over. Not even close. There's still 1944 to get through, and 45 after that. 2 more years of this. 2 more years of watching men die and cities burn and hope evaporate like morning dew. The war has changed. You can feel it in your bones. The confident army that swept across Europe in 39 and 40 is gone. What's left is something grimmer, something desperate. An army that's no longer fighting to win, but fighting simply to survive. Fighting to delay the inevitable. Even if nobody will say that out loud either. Winter comes back. Because, of course, it does. You'd almost forgotten what real cold feels like. The summer at Kursk burned that memory right out of you. But now it's November and the temperature is plummeting, and your body remembers everything. The way your fingers go numb first, then your toes, then this deep, gnawing ache in your joints that never quite goes away no matter how close to the fire you manage to get. The Dnieper line was supposed to hold. That was the whole point of retreating this far. Fall back to a natural barrier, the river. Dig in. Make the Soviets bleed for every meter. Buy time for the factories back home to build more tanks and planes and all those wonder weapons the propaganda keeps promising. It held for about 3 weeks. The Soviets crossed in October, at multiple points along the river. Some places they used boats. Other places they just waited for the water to freeze solid and walked across. 3 million men don't stop for a river. They go around it, over it, through it if they have to. Now it's trench warfare again. Holes in the frozen ground. Bunkers made of logs and dirt. Machine gun nests covering approaches that the enemy will attack anyway because they have more men than you have bullets. Wilhelm, still here. 23 now. Your birthday passed somewhere in the chaos of the retreat. And you didn't even notice until Eric mentioned it 3 days later. Happy birthday, he said. You're still alive. That's more than most get. Some gift. The position you're holding now used to be a collective farm. Soviet. One of those big agricultural operations the communists set up after the revolution. The main building is rubble. The barn burned down months ago, but there's a root cellar that makes a decent command post, and the sturdy stone walls of the farmhouse foundation provide some cover from shrapnel. Jürgen is still with you, the 17-year-old from Bavaria who lied about his age. 18 now, officially old enough to die for his country. He's changed since Kursk. Quieter, harder. The baby fat melted off his face, and what's left looks like it belongs to someone much older. Someone who's seen things no kid should see. He doesn't talk about his mother anymore. Doesn't take out that photograph. You wonder if he lost it somewhere or if he just can't bring himself to look at it now. Bear to look at it. The days bled into one another, an indistinguishable blur. You wake before dawn. Check the perimeter, an endless, monotonous ritual. Eat whatever meager, unappetizing slop the field kitchen managed to produce. Scan the tree line for any sign of movement. Clean your weapon, then check your ammunition again. Count the rounds. Always counting. There is never enough. Soviet artillery comes in relentless waves. Sometimes at predictable intervals, sometimes completely random, like a sadistic game. You learn, out of sheer necessity, to read the sounds, the distinct whistle of incoming shells, the subtle difference between one that's going to land dangerously close and one that will merely pass overhead. The guys who can't learn that difference don't last long out here. A direct hit annihilates the adjacent bunker on December 3rd. 4 men gone in a flash of blinding light and a shower of frozen dirt. Afterward, you help dig through the grotesque debris, searching for survivors. There are none, only pieces. Just meat and cloth and shattered bone. You find a hand still gripping a rifle, the fingers frozen in a final, defiant grip. You don't know whose hand it was. The dog tags are somewhere in the wreckage, but you can't find them amidst the chaos, and after a while, you stop looking. Christmas arrived, a hollow mockery of the holiday, in 1943. Someone produces a salvaged bottle of schnapps from somewhere, God knows how. Contraband, probably. Traded for cigarettes, or stolen from a supply depot, or perhaps carried all the way from Germany in someone's pack. You pass it around. Each man takes a small sip, not enough to get drunk, just enough to feel a fleeting warmth in your stomach for a few minutes. Just enough to create a fragile illusion of normalcy, to pretend this is a celebration instead of a wake. Someone starts singing, a faint, familiar tune. Silent Night. The same song your mother used to sing when you were small. Back when Christmas meant presents and cookies and staying up late by the fire. Back when the world made sense. Other voices join in, rough and discordant from disuse. Men who haven't sung anything in months. Men who have forgotten what joy sounds like. But they remember the words. Everyone remembers the words. The song drifts out across the frozen landscape, a poignant, fragile sound in the vast darkness, maybe 100 meters away. The guns go quiet for a few minutes. Just silence and snow and the fading echo of a song about peace. It doesn't last. It never lasts. But for those few minutes, you're not soldiers anymore. You're just men, far from home, missing the people you love, wondering if you'll ever see them again. Think of your bed right now. Wherever you are, you can probably hear familiar, comforting sounds, a heater humming, traffic outside, maybe someone else breathing nearby. Wilhelm hears artillery and wind and the distant crack of rifle fire, different soundtracks, different lives. Hold on to yours for a second. Jürgen's raw sob cuts through the fragile peace. He doesn't try to hide it. He just sits there, tears tracing icy paths down his cheeks, as the song fades into silence. Nobody says anything. Nobody judges him. They've all done the same at some point. Some of them are doing it right now. Eric doesn't drink. Doesn't sing. He just sits there staring into the flickering flames with eyes that held the emptiness of the front. His wife sent him a letter somehow. It arrived 3 days ago, the first tangible link to the world he'd left behind in months. He read it once, then again, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket, and hasn't said a word since. What did she say, you inquire? Nothing, he says. Everything. She wants to know when I'm coming home. What did you tell her? He looks at you and you see it in his eyes, the truth neither of you wants to say out loud. That he doesn't know if he's coming home. That statistically speaking, he probably isn't. That every day out here is borrowed time, a death sentence deferred, and the debt is coming due sooner or later. I told her spring, he says finally. I told her I'd be home by spring. You both know that's a lie, a desperate fabrication. But what else can you say? What else can any of them say? The men writing letters home. The officers filing reports. The generals moving pins on maps and warm headquarters hundreds of kilometers from the front. Everyone's lying to everyone else because the truth is too heavy to carry. January brings fresh Soviet offensives, a relentless, unending tide. They never seem to stop. Every time you think you've stabilized a sector, they hit somewhere else, probing attacks, breakthroughs, encirclements. The front line isn't a line anymore, it's a jagged, fractured mess, a series of strong points connected by gaps that keep getting wider. Your unit gets moved 3 times in 2 weeks. Plug this hole. Reinforce that position. Fall back to the next defensive line because the last one collapsed. You stop unpacking your gear because there's no point. You'll just have to pack it again tomorrow. The replacements keep coming, but they're different now. Older or younger. Nothing in between. Men in their 40s who fought in the last war and thought they were done with all this. Boys who look like they should be in school. The men in their 20s, the prime fighting age, are running out, used up in 2.5 years of grinding combat on a front that stretches from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Someone jokes that soon they'll be drafting the cemetery residents. Nobody laughs. It's too close to the truth. One of the new guys is 53. 53. He was a baker in Munich. His hands, once adept at shaping dough, made strudel and pretzels and those little cookies his wife sold at the Christmas market. Now he's here in a frozen trench in Ukraine, holding a rifle that felt alien in his grasp. He dies on his 4th day. Heart attack, not even enemy fire. Just his body giving out from the cold and the stress and the sheer impossibility of what they're asking him to do. You find him in the morning curled up in his sleeping position, as if he's just taking a nap. Eyes open, face peaceful, gone. Maybe he was the lucky one. February brings a devastating Soviet offensive in the south. You hear about it through the rumor network that's more reliable than official communications at this point. A whole German corps was encircled near a place called Korsun. Tens of thousands of men trapped in a pocket that's shrinking by the hour. The relief force tries to break through, tanks pushing through snow and mud and Soviet defensive lines, getting close. Close enough that the men inside the pocket can hear the guns, close enough to give them a false dawn of hope, but not close enough. The breakout order comes on a February night so cold that engines won't start, and wounds freeze before they can bleed. The trapped men have to fight their way out on foot through Soviet lines, through artillery barrages, through machine gun positions that turn the snow red for kilometers. Some of them make it, stumbling into friendly lines with frostbite and wounds and stories that defy comprehension. They talk about fields of bodies, about men freezing to death as they walked, about horses shot for food and then abandoned when there wasn't time to butcher them. Most don't make it. The numbers are vague because nobody really knows. But the whispers say 20,000 dead, maybe more. Another Stalingrad, smaller perhaps, but the same basic story, Germans going in, not coming out. You meet one of the survivors, a sergeant from Saxony who walked 40 kilometers through enemy territory with a bullet in his thigh. His eyes have that look, the one you've seen on men who've been to the edge and somehow come back. Empty, distant, like part of him is still out there in the snow with the ones who didn't make it. Don't ask, he rasps when you try to talk to him. Just don't ask. You don't. And somewhere in Berlin, the propaganda machine still churns out fantastical promises of wonder weapons. Still insisting that victory is just around the corner. Still demanding that every man fight to the last bullet for a cause that stopped making sense somewhere around the time the Sixth Army froze to death in the ruins of a city most of them couldn't even pronounce. Spring comes eventually, like it always does, bringing with it a deceptive, treacherous beauty. The snow melts, the mud returns. The roads that were frozen solid become impossible rivers of muck that swallow trucks and horses and men who aren't careful where they step. You've been on the Eastern Front for over a year now, survived 2 winters, 3 major battles, countless smaller engagements that don't have names but still killed people you knew. You've watched friends die in ways you couldn't have imagined before the war. You've done things you'll never talk about. Things that wake you up at night, even now, even here, even when you're so exhausted you can barely keep your eyes open. Eric is still alive. Jürgen is still alive. A handful of others from the original unit. But most of the faces around you are new now, strangers who arrived last week or last month and might be dead by next week or next month. You've stopped learning their names. It hurts less that way. The rumors in April are about an invasion. The Western Allies, the British and Americans, are going to land somewhere in France. Everyone knows it's coming. The only question is when and where. Some guys think it might be a good thing. Let the Allies fight the Soviets. Let them see what it's like to face this endless wave of men and machines. Maybe they'll realize that Germany was right all along. Maybe they'll switch sides. You don't believe that. Not anymore. You don't believe much of anything anymore. You just put one foot in front of the other and try to survive until tomorrow. That's all any of you are doing now, surviving. Not winning. Not even really fighting. Just surviving. There's talk about being transferred west to France, to the Atlantic Wall they've been building for years. Some of the men are excited about it. France means better food, better weather, an enemy that hasn't been hardened by 3 years of total war. But the transfers don't come. Not for your unit anyway. You're staying here on the Eastern Front, where the real war is being fought, where men die by the tens of thousands in battles that barely make the newspapers back home. May arrives and the tension builds, a palpable, suffocating dread. Something is coming. Everyone can feel it. The Soviets are massing forces somewhere. The scouts report movement, trucks and tanks and artillery pieces flowing toward the front like water toward a drain. The generals know. The officers know. Even the privates huddled in their trenches know a storm is building. And when it breaks, it's going to make Kursk look like a skirmish. The spring sun feels good on your face when you can find a moment to sit in it, warm, almost peaceful. You close your eyes and for a second you can pretend you're somewhere else. A park in Hamburg, maybe, or a cafe in Berlin, somewhere with music and laughter and people who aren't trying to kill you. Then a shell lands somewhere nearby and the moment is gone, and you're back in the trench with mud on your boots and fear in your gut, and the grim certainty that things are about to get much worse. June is coming, and with it, something that will make everything before it look like a warm-up. You don't know that yet. None of you do. You're just trying to make it through another day, another week, another month in this frozen hell that's finally starting to thaw. Eric sits next to you, skinnier than ever, his wedding ring loose on his finger now. He could take it off if he wanted to, but he doesn't. Think she's still waiting? He asks. Your wife? Yeah. You look at him, at the hollows under his eyes, the gray creeping into his hair, the tremor in his hands that wasn't there a year ago. I think she is, you say? I think she's counting the days. He nods. Doesn't say anything else. Just sits there in the thin spring sunshine, while somewhere to the east the guns keep rumbling. Always rumbling, never stopping. The front is quiet today, relatively anyway. No major attacks, no desperate last stands, just the constant low-grade tension of knowing that somewhere out there, millions of soldiers are waiting for the order to advance, waiting to finish what they started. And you're right in their way. Not for much longer, though. June is coming, and June will change everything. You just don't know it yet. June 6, 1944. The news arrived in fragmented whispers. Bits of radio chatter. Officers huddling around maps. Whispered conversations that spread through the trenches like ripples in water. The Allies had landed in France, in Normandy. Thousands of ships. Tens of thousands of men pouring onto beaches that were supposed to be impregnable. The vaunted Atlantic Wall, boasted as impregnable, had been breached. For a moment, nobody knows what to say. The strategic landscape had irrevocably shifted. Germany was fighting on 2 fronts now, 3 if you count Italy. The noose was tightening, and everyone could feel it. Some of the men were almost relieved. Maybe the Western Allies would keep the Soviets busy. Maybe there'll be negotiations. Maybe this means the war is finally ending one way or another. You're not that optimistic. Neither is Eric. You've been out here too long to believe in easy endings. But D-Day isn't your problem. Not directly. You're 1,000 kilometers from France. Still on the Eastern Front, still watching the tree line, still counting ammunition and wondering if tomorrow will be the day your luck runs out. 16 days later, your real problem arrives. June 22nd, the 3rd anniversary of Operation Barbarossa, the day Germany invaded the Soviet Union 3 years ago. You don't think about the symbolism at the time. You're too busy dying. It starts with the artillery, not the usual harassment fire, but something different, something vastly bigger. A rolling thunder that builds and builds until the ground itself is shaking, until the air is more metal than oxygen, until you can't hear anything except the screaming of shells and the screaming of men. The Soviets have named it Operation Bagration, after some general from the Napoleonic Wars. 166 divisions, 2.5 million soldiers, 6,000 tanks, 45,000 artillery pieces. All of it aimed at one stretch of the front. Your stretch, Army Group Center. That's what they're targeting. The German forces holding the line in Belarus. The forces that have been there since 41. The forces that include you. The bombardment goes on for hours. You press yourself into the dirt at the bottom of your trench and pray to a god you stopped believing in somewhere around Kursk. The earth jumps and bucks beneath you. Dirt rains down. Wood splinters. Men scream. Your ears are ringing, have been ringing for so long you can't remember what silence sounds like. The world is vibration and noise and the taste of dirt in your mouth. You've bitten your tongue. Blood and soil mixed together. Everything tastes like the end of the world. A shell lands close, too close. The blast wave hits you like a physical fist, knocking the breath out of your lungs. For a moment you think you're dead. You actually think it. This is it. This is how it ends. But you're still breathing, still conscious, still alive in a world that seems determined to kill you. When it finally stops, the world is different. Half the positions you knew are gone, cratered, obliterated. Men you talked to yesterday are scattered across the landscape in pieces too small to identify. The silence is almost worse than the noise. This ringing emptiness where the thunder used to be. And then you hear it. A new sound. Low at first. Growing engines. And then the tanks come. T-34s. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. Grinding forward in waves that seem endless. Behind them, infantry. Waves of infantry. More men than you've ever seen in one place. More men than should exist in the entire world. The German line doesn't bend. It shatters. Within hours, your unit is surrounded. Not encircled in the traditional sense. Just cut off. The Soviets have punched through on both sides of your position and kept going. You're an island now. A pocket of Germans in a sea of red. Jürgen is hit in the shoulder by a bullet during the initial assault. The bullet passes cleanly through, miraculously missing the bone. In this hellish landscape, such a wound is considered a stroke of luck, if one can even refer to being shot as fortunate. You quickly patch him up, scavenging what you can from a fallen medic's kit, and order him to remain out of sight. But he can't stay down. No one can afford to. There are simply too few able-bodied men left to adequately defend the line, much less allow the injured to recuperate. Every single person, every man still capable of gripping a rifle, is forced to join the desperate struggle. On the radio, commands crackle through, a jumbled mess of contradictory and utterly confusing directives. Hold your position! Fall back to the river! Hold at all costs! Retreat to the rally point! Utter disorientation reigns. No one has any clear understanding of the unfolding situation. The entire chain of command is audibly, palpably dissolving in real time. You manage to hold your ground for 2 agonizing days, enduring a relentless, unceasing barrage of attacks. 2 days spent meticulously rationing what little ammunition remains, the supply lines having completely vanished. 2 days of grimly witnessing the defensive perimeter visibly shrink, as one position after another inevitably succumbs. On the 3rd day, the inevitable happens. Eric is struck. A mortar round lands nearby, not a direct hit, but close enough for shrapnel to tear into his side, just beneath his ribs. He collapses instantly and doesn't stir again. You see the entire horrific event unfold before your eyes. One moment, he's right beside you, firing intently into the tree line. The next, a blinding flash, a deafening bang, and he's on the muddy ground, motionless. A choked, "No, no, no, no," escapes you. Under a hail of bullets cracking dangerously close overhead, you desperately drag his inert form into a nearby shell crater. His blood, sickeningly warm, gushes onto your hands. There's far too much blood. An unimaginable amount. It rapidly stains his tunic, forming dark, spreading pools in the mud beneath him. You instinctively try to stem the flow, pressing your hands against the wound, but it's catastrophically large, impossibly deep. The blood continues to surge, relentlessly soaking through your fingers, no matter how much pressure you apply. "Wilhelm," he rasps, his voice horribly altered, wet and feeble. "Shut up," you command him, your own voice trembling. "Save your strength. You're going to be fine." Both of you know it's a desperate, hollow lie. The wound is far too deep, far too mangled. He needs a surgeon, a proper hospital, luxuries that simply cease to exist, not here, not for hundreds of kilometers in any direction. His hand seeks yours, clenching it with surprising force. His fingers are already cold to the touch. This is an ominous sign. A terrible, undeniable sign. "Tell her," he pleads. "You're going to tell her yourself." He clutches your arm, squeezing with a surge of strength you didn't know he still possessed. His eyes are wide, desperate, full of an urgent plea. This is everything now, the singular, most important thing left. "Tell her I kept my promise," he insists. "Tell her I'm coming home." His gaze locks onto yours, and for a fleeting second, he sheds the uniform, the soldier's hardened shell. He is simply a man, a husband, someone who yearned to bake strudel, to grow old gracefully, to watch his children raise families of their own. A man who penned unsent letters, for the words themselves were all the comfort he had left. "Spring," he whispers, the word barely audible. "I promised her spring." And then, just like that, he is gone. One final breath, then nothing. His hand falls slack, his grip dissolving. His eyes remain wide open, fixed on the dreary gray sky. Staring at nothing at all. You remain there for an impossibly long time, far longer than safety permits. Bullets hiss and snap just inches above your head. Explosions rumble menacingly in the distance. The world is quite literally ending all around you, yet you cannot move. You cannot think. You can do nothing but clutch the cold hand of a dead man who was meant to return home. Jürgen eventually finds you, roughly pulling you back towards the tattered remnants of the defensive line. His bandaged shoulder is now visibly bleeding through, but he continues to move, continues to fight. The young man from Bavaria, who once wept openly at Christmas, has now transformed into something entirely different, something far more hardened. "We have to go," he states flatly. The entire pocket is collapsing. Everyone is retreating west. You gaze down at Eric's body, knowing you should bury him, should do something more, but there's no time, no shovels, no means for any dignified action. Instead, you carefully remove his wedding ring, slipping it into your pocket. It is proof for his wife, tangible evidence that he once existed, that he mattered, that somewhere in this godforsaken wasteland, a good man met a pointless end. Pause for a moment to consider your own hands. Wherever you may be, they are likely warm, clean, unmarred by a friend's blood, not trembling from the potent mix of adrenaline and profound grief. Wilhelm's hands, however, will not cease their shaking for days to come. Then you run. The retreat quickly devolves into utter chaos. Thousands of men stream westward, A desperate human tide attempting to outrun the relentless Soviet advance, desperately seeking German lines that may well have ceased to exist. There is no semblance of organization, no leadership, only the primal instinct for survival remains. You cannot run in a straight line. It's impossible. Soviet forces seem to be everywhere, closing in from all sides. You run, hide, then run again, traversing forests thick with the scent of pine and decay, across fields that were once peaceful farms, along roads choked with the grotesque wreckage of an army that has entirely ceased to function. These roads are impassable, clogged with abandoned vehicles, tanks and trucks immobilized by lack of fuel, artillery pieces deliberately blown apart to prevent their capture, horses dead in their harnesses, and men dead beside them. The pervasive stench is utterly indescribable. It is the suffocating miasma of death, diesel fumes, and acrid smoke, the unmistakable, sickening perfume of total collapse. When you finally pause to drink from a stream, the water tastes strangely of ash. Indeed, everything tastes of ash now. Your boots are disintegrating, their soles flapping loose, making every single step an agonizing ordeal on feet that have been moving for days without rest. But to stop is to invite death. So you force yourself onward. Left foot, right foot. Don't think, just move. At night you seek meager refuge in deserted barns, forgotten cellars, or muddy drainage ditches, anywhere the omnipresent enemy aircraft cannot spot you, anywhere patrols might overlook. Sleep comes in fractured shifts, an hour here, 30 minutes there. It's never enough, leaving you perpetually on edge, your senses screaming for rest. Occasionally you encounter other survivors, small bands of men as utterly lost and disoriented as you are. Some join your makeshift group, others simply drift away. These fragmented groups form and dissolve fluidly, like cells dividing and rejoining. There is no one in command, no one with any answers. No one knows where to go. West is the only direction, the sole imperative. West is the only thing that still matters. You pass through villages engulfed in flames, their churches reduced to skeletal ruins with collapsed steeples, farmhouses pulverized into unrecognizable rubble. In these scenes of devastation, civilians lie dead, caught in the merciless crossfire. Women, children, and old men, non-combatants all, perished regardless, for war, in its brutal indifference, cares nothing for innocence. In one particular village, a haunting image sears itself into your memory. A woman standing motionless before her burning home, her children silently beside her. They neither run nor scream, they simply watch, as if all their fear has been utterly consumed, leaving behind only a chilling, numb acceptance. You desperately want to help, to stop and intervene, but there is absolutely nothing you can do. Nothing anyone can do. And so you keep walking. The Soviets are omnipresent, or at least they seem to be. Partisans lurk behind the lines, tank columns ruthlessly cut off retreat routes, and aircraft ceaselessly strafe anything that dares to move on the roads. You quickly learn to instinctively dive for cover at the mere sound of an engine. You learn to travel exclusively at night, hidden from the predatory eyes of the planes. You learn to trust nothing and no one, save for the man moving beside you. Jürgen remains steadfastly close. The two of you move as one, snatching sleep in shifts, sharing meager rations, and constantly watching each other's backs. He rarely speaks, and neither do you. There is simply nothing left to say. Days bleed into weeks. You lose all sense of time, all measure of distance. West remains the only direction that holds any meaning. West, away from the Soviets, towards a sliver of what might be safety, if you can only reach it before your body, before your legs, finally give out. The figures you would later learn are absolutely staggering. Army Group Center simply ceased to exist. 28 divisions were not merely defeated, they were utterly annihilated. Over 400,000 German soldiers were killed or captured, the single greatest defeat in the history of the German army, dwarfing even Stalingrad, eclipsing anything that came before. The Soviets surged forward 400 kilometers in a single month, pushing deep into Poland, reaching the very outskirts of Warsaw. The entire Eastern Front buckled, bent, and came perilously close to shattering completely. And through it all, you just kept walking. Eventually, miraculously, you reach what remains of the German lines. It's a makeshift defensive position, hastily cobbled together from scraps, manned by survivors from a dozen different, shattered units. These men appear as hollow-eyed and shell-shocked as you feel deep within your bones. An officer, looking weary beyond his years, takes your name, assigns you to a newly reformed unit, presses a rifle and some ammunition into your hands, and points you towards a trench. So, it's back to it. The same grim routine as always, as it has been since the very beginning. Only now you are in Poland instead of Russia. Only now, Eric is irrevocably dead. And only now, the war is undeniably lost, a truth everyone tacitly understands, even if no one dares to utter it aloud. You find your assigned spot in the trench, settling into the familiar mud and grim reality. You stare east, towards the enemy you cannot see, but know with chilling certainty is coming. Jürgen sits beside you. His shoulder is mostly healed, though it will undoubtedly scar badly, and he will likely never regain full range of motion. Yet he is alive, which is a rare fortune, more than most have received. You have something, he says, a quiet observation. You glance down at your hands at the ring you are still clutching, a gold band, tarnished now, worn smooth from years of belonging on another man's finger. I have to find her, you say, the words catching in your throat. After the war. I have to tell her what happened. Jürgen offers no words, only a somber nod. In the distance, the guns rumble incessantly, a constant, never-ending thrum. The Soviets are regrouping, consolidating supplies, preparing for their next inevitable push. It is August 1944. The war, unbeknownst to you, has perhaps 9 months left, maybe even less. You cannot know this, cannot conceive of an end. All you know is that tomorrow you will wake up and endure this again, and the day after, and the day after that, until you are physically, mentally, utterly incapable of doing so anymore. The front, in a manner of speaking, stabilizes. The Soviets have temporarily outrun their extended supply lines and require time to regroup, to bring up fresh reinforcements, and to meticulously prepare for the next inevitable push that will surely come soon enough. You seize this fragile pause to slowly, painfully, remember how to simply be human again. To eat food that hasn't been scavenged from abandoned farmhouses. To sleep for more than an hour at a time, allowing your exhausted body to begin healing from wounds you were too numb to even notice acquiring. A new commanding officer arrives, some fresh-faced captain transferred from the Western Front. He delivers impassioned speeches about holding the line, about defending the fatherland, about achieving final victory. His words, however, wash over you like water off a stone. You have heard it all before, countless times. And you no longer believe any of it. The replacements arriving now are younger than ever, 17, sometimes even 16 years old. They are mere children, playing soldier in uniforms that hang ill-fittingly on their too thin frames. They gaze at you and Jürgen as if you are ancient relics, survivors from some long-lost civilization, which, perhaps, you are. One of them timidly asks what it was like, the retreat, the aggression, the whole devastating experience. You don't answer. You can't. How do you begin to explain watching your friend bleed out and die in a muddy shell crater? How do you accurately describe the horrifying sound of an entire army tearing itself apart at the seams? How do you even put into words the visceral experience of walking for days on end with no sleep and barely any food, while the world utterly burns down around you? You simply shake your head slowly. The kid, understanding the unspoken message, stops asking. At night, your dreams are haunted by Eric. You see him standing in a sun-drenched wheat field with his wife, both of them smiling serenely, a baby cradled in her arms. It is the life he was destined to have, the life that tragically ended in a muddy crater somewhere in Belarus. You jolt awake, a ring pressing painfully into your palm. You realize you have been clutching it tightly in your sleep. The gold is warm, imbued with your body heat, warm just as it was when you carefully slipped it from his lifeless hand. Somewhere in Germany, a baker's wife continues to wait, still expecting a letter from her husband. She counts the days until spring, blissfully unaware. She doesn't know yet. No one does. It is October 1944. They're sending you home. Not home as in your specific house or city, but home, to Germany itself. Not Hamburg, where your mother lives, nor the apartment you grew up in, but to German soil, the physical land you haven't seen in almost 2 agonizing years. The reason for this reprieve isn't compassion, but rather cold, hard logistics. Your unit is being reformed once more, pulled off the front lines for refitting and urgent reorganization. A few weeks in the rear are allotted to absorb new replacements and hastily train them before you are all inevitably hurled back into the ceaseless meat grinder of the war. You board a battered train, slowly rattling its way west. Jurgen sits silently across from you, his shoulder now a hardened knot of scar tissue that aches predictably whenever the rain falls. The trains, of course, no longer run on any semblance of a schedule. Partisan attacks, relentless Allied bombing raids, and crippling fuel shortages stretch a journey that should take a day into 3 arduous ones. The first thing that truly strikes you is the sky. It feels wrong. Even in broad daylight, a pervasive haze, a suffocating grayness, hangs oppressively over everything. And at night, the reason becomes horrifyingly clear: the cities are burning. You pass through what was once Dresden, or perhaps it's another city. It's almost impossible to tell the difference now. The few buildings still standing resemble grotesque, broken teeth. Rubble lies everywhere, an endless landscape of shattered masonry. Columns of smoke rise lazily from smoldering fires that no one bothers to extinguish, because what, truly, is the point? People listlessly pick through the ruins, searching for scraps of food, salvaged belongings, or perhaps for bodies. They don't even bother to look up when the train passes. They have long since ceased to care about trains, or anything else. A woman stands numbly on a street corner, clutching a photograph, simply standing there, showing it to anyone who passes, desperately searching for someone. Her husband, perhaps her son, someone who ventured into the rubble and never emerged. Children actually play in bomb craters, treating them like natural playgrounds, like it's a normal game. The shattered world around them is normal to them, because this is all they have ever known: a country at war, a country slowly, irrevocably dying. You recall the bright, optimistic propaganda posters you saw before you shipped out, images of happy families, robust workers, a Germany proudly building towards a glorious future. That Germany no longer exists. Perhaps, you realize with a cold certainty, it never truly did. Jurgen stares blankly out the window, his silence profound. What, indeed, is there to say? You had no idea it was this devastating. Out on the Eastern Front, you'd heard the chilling rumors of bombing raids, heard the numbers: 1,000 planes, 2,000 planes, entire cities flattened in a single night. But hearing about it, you now understand, is vastly different from witnessing it firsthand. The train eventually grinds to a halt in a town you don't recognize, some nondescript place in Silesia. Gray buildings, gray people, a gray sky, everything is a muted, desolate gray. An officer greets you at the platform. He's a young man, far too young, perhaps 20 at most. He carries the unmistakable air of someone who has never been anywhere near a front line. His uniform is immaculate, his creases sharp, his boots polished to an unnatural shine. "Welcome to the training depot," he chirps, a stark contrast to the grim reality you've just endured. "You'll be here for 2 weeks, maybe 3, then it's back to the front." Just great, you think sarcastically. The barracks are bitterly cold, half their windows shattered and never repaired. You find an empty bunk, collapse onto it, and stare blankly at the ceiling, desperately trying to empty your mind of all thought. The next morning, they march you out to the training grounds, and that's when you finally see them, the Volkssturm. You'd heard rumors: Hitler's desperate new army, the People's Storm, comprised of every male between 16 and 60 not already in uniform, shopkeepers, teachers, factory workers, grandfathers, even children. But rumors, you quickly realize, do nothing to prepare you for the stark, heartbreaking reality. In the ragged line, there's a man who must be at least 65 years old, with white hair and severely stooped shoulders. He's wearing a business suit, because no one has even bothered to issue him a uniform. Only a crude black and red armband on his left sleeve marks him as a soldier now. A soldier of the Reich. He clutches a rifle that appears older than he is, perhaps a relic from the Great War, or even the one before that. Next to him stands a boy, no older than 14 or 15, skinny and visibly terrified. He wears his father's oversized coat, the sleeves hanging far past his wrists, the only one he owns. The rifle clutched in his small hands is almost as tall as he is. These are the people now expected to defend Germany. These grandfathers and children, these pitiful figures, are supposed to halt the juggernaut of the Soviet army with rusty hunting rifles, symbolic armbands, and perhaps half a day of rudimentary training. You watch them attempt to drill, if such a pathetic spectacle can even be called a drill. March, turn, present arms. Most don't even know which way to turn, and some can barely lift their unwieldy weapons. A sergeant, his face puce with frustration, screams at them, echoing the very same phrases you heard in your own basic training a lifetime ago. Faster! Straighter! Again! The old man in the ill-fitting business suit is visibly sweating, despite the biting cold. The scrawny kid in his father's coat looks perpetually on the verge of tears. The weapons they are issued are a pathetic museum collection, Mausers from the Great War, French rifles captured in 1940, Norwegian hunting guns, Czech pistols, Danish carbines. Nothing matches. Absolutely nothing works together. Half of these desperate men can't even find the correct ammunition for the archaic firearms they've been given. One man clutches a Panzerfaust, the single-shot rocket launcher theoretically capable of stopping a Soviet tank. He has never fired one before. No one has taught him how. He is simply expected to figure it out when the enemy tanks inevitably roll over the hill. Another holds one of those crude, spray-can flamethrowers, the Einsatzflammenwerfer. Its operational instructions are brutally simple: point and shoot. A half-second spurt of fire erupts, and then the weapon is empty. You're left clutching a useless metal tube as the menacing barrel of a tank's turret inexorably turns in your direction. These, they claim, are the wonder weapons, the instruments that will secure ultimate victory. Jürgen stands beside you, a silent observer. They're all going to die, he whispers, his voice barely audible. Every last one of them. You offer no argument, for there is truly nothing to debate. You've witnessed firsthand the devastation wrought by Soviet tanks on infantry positions, and the merciless efficiency of massed artillery against exposed men. These grandfathers and mere children will not withstand 5 minutes against a proper assault. Yet, they are all that remains. The Wehrmacht has been hemorrhaging men for 3 long years. Those in their 20s are long gone, utterly spent. What's left is the dregs, the sediment at the very bottom of the barrel, individuals too young, too old, or previously deemed too essential to be called up. Now, no one is considered essential. Now, everyone is conscripted. Over the ensuing days, further details emerge. The Volkssturm, you discover, is not part of the regular army. Its command falls directly under the Nazi Party. Its members do not answer to generals but instead to local party officials, bureaucrats, and fervent ideologues who, having never fired a shot in anger themselves, are now dispatching old men and children to confront tanks on the front line. They lack sufficient uniforms and weapons. Some carry antiquated hunting rifles. Others wield firearms captured from France, Denmark, or Norway. A handful are equipped with peculiar contraptions resembling oversized spray cans, single-shot flamethrowers designed for a desperate point-and-shoot attack. A party official delivers a speech, which you are compelled to attend. His words are filled with rhetoric about the indomitable spirit of the German people, the certainty of ultimate victory, and the imminence of wonder weapons that will decisively turn the tide of the war. He speaks of V-2 rockets, raining terror, on London, and Mi-262 jet fighters poised to sweep Allied bombers from the skies, aircraft supposedly faster and more untouchable than anything the enemy possesses. These are the untouchable secret weapons, the miracle weapons, the very instruments of Germany's inevitable triumph. You, however, have seen precisely one jet fighter since the war began, a lone blur that streaked across your position last month, fast, beautiful, and vanished in seconds. one singular plane against the thousands of Allied bombers that darkened the skies daily. The arithmetic simply doesn't add up. But it seems no one in Berlin retains any concern for basic mathematics anymore. You've heard it all countless times before. Wonder weapons! Always! Wonder weapons! Always some new, miraculous device on the horizon, promising to change everything. Meanwhile, the front lines are collapsing, cities are burning, and grandfathers are awkwardly learning to wield rifles in town squares all across Germany. An elderly man, still dressed in his ill-fitting business suit, collapses during training, succumbing not to enemy fire but to a heart attack. Like the baker who perished in the trenches last winter, his aged body simply gave out, unable to endure tasks it was never meant to perform. His lifeless form is carried away, and the drill continues without pause. There is no time for mourning, no time for anything but the relentless preparation for the inevitable. That night, you find the boy huddled behind the barracks, wrapped in his father's oversized coat, his knees drawn up to his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. His name is Thomas, a boy of 14. His father fell at Stalingrad, and his older brother perished in Normandy. He is the last male remaining in his family line, now called upon to defend the fatherland. "I don't want to die," he whimpers, his voice raw with fear. "I really don't want to die." What words can you possibly offer him? What reassurance could you give? That everything will somehow be fine? That he will survive this? That the war will miraculously end before he ever sees combat? You cannot bring yourself to lie. Not about this. Not to a face so heartbreakingly young. Stay behind the older men. You finally manage to say. Keep your head down. Never volunteer for anything. Don't try to be brave. He looks up at you, his eyes bloodshot and red, snot tracing paths down his chin. "Will that work?" he asks. "Sometimes," you reply, the word tasting hollow. "Sometimes it works." You offer him a cigarette, despite his obvious youth. He chokes on the first drag, then the second, but by the third, he has mastered it. Another lesson learned far too soon. If you are listening to this somewhere safe, comfortable in your bed, take a moment to think of Thomas. 14 years old, already orphaned, already conscripted, already weeping behind a barracks, fully aware of the horrors that await him. He was someone's child, someone's baby brother, someone's entire world. The war, you realize, now devours children. This is what it has truly come to. News from the front lines continues its grim decline. Romania defected in August. Bulgaria soon followed suit. When Hungary attempted to negotiate with the Soviets, German forces swiftly occupied the country to prevent it. The Allies, once pledged to stand by Germany, are now abandoning the cause, one by one. The Soviets are deep within Poland, having pushed across its borders since August. The front line, once 1,000 kilometers from the German border, now lies mere hundreds of kilometers away, relentlessly drawing nearer each day. And in the west, American and British forces are relentlessly pushing toward the Rhine, through France, through Belgium, closing in on Germany from the opposite flank. The noose, undeniably, is tightening. Everyone senses it. Even the party officials, still delivering their impassioned speeches about ultimate victory, cannot entirely conceal the creeping doubt in their eyes. 2 weeks stretch into 3. By day you train replacements, regular soldiers now, at least capable of identifying the dangerous end of a rifle. At night you lie awake, listening to the distant, ominous thunder of bombs falling somewhere in the west. Jürgen, too, struggles for sleep, as do all the others. The nightmares are too vivid, the memories too raw. Sometimes, you take out Eric's ring, holding the cool metal in your palm. You think of his wife, still waiting in Munich. You recall the promise you made: if you survive, if you make it home, you will find her, tell her what transpired, and give her this ring. It is the sole tangible thing left, the only anchor in this swirling madness, the only thing that imbues any of it with meaning. December arrives. The training depot rapidly empties out, its occupants dispatched eastward, westward, everyone moving, everyone going somewhere. It is the grand reshuffling of a dying army. New orders reach your unit, not east this time, but west, to the Ardennes forest. Some sort of offensive is being planned. Something significant. Something that, they claim, will change everything. You have, of course, heard that before. The train heading west moves even more sluggishly than the one that brought you here. It halts constantly, plagued by engine trouble, critical fuel shortages, and tracks damaged by relentless bombing raids. What should be a journey of hours stretches into days. You pass through yet more ruined cities, witness more people sifting through rubble, and see more fires burning ominously on the horizon. Thomas is also aboard this train, the 14-year-old still wrapped in his father's coat. His Volkssturm unit is being sent to the same sector, thrown in with regular troops simply to swell the numbers. He sits near you, largely silent, merely gazing out the window at the ravaged country he is supposedly meant to defend. "I wrote my mother a letter," he finally volunteers. "I told her I loved her, that I was sorry for all the times I made her angry, and that I would try to come home." Your mind drifts to Eric, to unsent letters and broken promises. "That's good," you say, your voice gentle. "That's the right thing to do." The train continues its slow, rattling journey west, toward the forest, toward whatever grim fate awaits them there. Outside the window, the sky remains an unrelenting gray. Always gray now. Even the first flakes of falling snow appear dirty, stained by the pervasive smoke and ash, by the dying light of a country consuming itself. You attempt to sleep, but the train lurches incessantly, shuddering to stops and starts. It waits on sidings, allowing other trains to pass, military trains laden with soldiers heading to the front, and hospital trains returning, carrying the wounded who stare out through fogged windows with eyes that have witnessed far too much. At one particular station, you spot a line of prisoners being marched along the platform, emaciated, skeletal figures in striped uniforms that hang loosely from their wasted bodies like sacks. Camp prisoners, you realize, being relocated somewhere. You do not know where, and you desperately do not want to know. One of them looks up as your train passes, making eye contact for a single, horrifying second. His eyes are utterly empty, hollow, already dead, even as his skeletal body continues to move. You quickly avert your gaze. You focus intently on the grimy floor of the train car, on your scuffed boots, on anything, except that face. Rumors about the camps have been circulating for years. What truly happens there? What unspeakable acts are being committed in Germany's name? You've tried desperately not to think about it, tried to convince yourself it's mere propaganda, enemy exaggeration, enemy lies. But that face, those vacant eyes, that is no propaganda. The train lurches forward once more, continuing its westward journey. The Ardennes, you confirm, that is your destination. Some grand offensive concocted by high command. Some desperate gamble, they hope, that will somehow salvage everything. The audacious plan, punched through the American lines, drives swiftly to the vital port of Antwerp, sever the Allied armies in two, and compel them to negotiate for peace. At least, that is what the officers are confidently asserting. One last, desperate throw of the dice. One final, improbable chance to reverse the tide of the war. They are calling it Operation Watch on the Rhine, a transparent code name meant to deceive the Allies into believing it's merely a defensive operation. As if names hold any significance anymore. As if the Allies don't already fully comprehend that Germany has exhausted its options. You no longer place any faith in desperate gambles. You've witnessed far too many of them end in utter failure. Kursk was meant to alter the course of the war. Operation Bagration was supposed to have been contained. Every single operation has been heralded as the one that would finally turn the tide. And every single one has ended in precisely the same grim manner, with retreat, with death, and with hollow promises of victory. Next time. But you go anyway, because orders are absolute. Because there is nowhere else to go. Because what else remains to be done but to keep moving forward until movement itself becomes impossible. Jürgen sleeps fitfully, his rifle cradled across his lap. Thomas remains awake, staring out the window. The boy seems to have aged a full decade in the mere weeks since you first encountered him behind those barracks. The tears are gone now, replaced by something far harder in his gaze. The train rattles onward through the desolate night, toward whatever grim reality awaits on the other side. December 16th is fast approaching. The day the offensive is slated to begin. The day everything, once more, is destined to change. December 1944. The war has perhaps 5 months left to run, maybe even less. No one knows this yet. Indeed, no one seems to know anything for certain anymore. December 16th, 1944, 4:30 in the pre-dawn morning. The forest is profoundly dark, bitterly cold, with snow blanketing the ground and fog hanging thick among the trees, almost like a living entity. Visibility is no more than 20 meters in any direction. You can barely discern the form of the man directly beside you. Then, the guns erupt. German guns this time. For once, you are on the attacking side. 2,000 artillery pieces fire simultaneously along an 80-meter front. The noise is utterly staggering. The very ground convulses, trees splinter and crack, and the dense fog itself appears to vibrate with the sheer force of the barrage. Somewhere out there in the swirling chaos, American soldiers are dying. Caught in their foxholes, perhaps in their bunkers, or even in their warm beds, they are taken by surprise. No one had warned them this was coming. No one knew. The Americans, the officers had claimed, had grown complacent. They believe the war is all but over. They believe Germany is finished. They envision a peaceful Christmas. They are about to learn otherwise. You advance with the first wave, pushing through the tangled trees, through the impenetrable fog, across terrain that seems to swallow all sound and sense of direction, until you are no longer certain of your bearing. You merely follow the man in front, trusting implicitly that someone, somewhere, knows where you are heading. The snow reaches your knees in certain spots. Every single step is a monumental effort. Your boots are utterly soaked within minutes. The frigid cold bites savagely at your toes, your fingers, your exposed face. But you keep moving, for to stop is to die. And you, above all else, have become exceptionally adept at not dying. The first Americans you encounter are already lifeless. Artillery has claimed them. Their bodies lie scattered around a ruined position, young faces, frozen in expressions of stark surprise. They never knew what struck them. One man is still clutching a photograph, a woman, perhaps his wife, his girlfriend, someone waiting back home in Ohio or Kansas, or wherever it is Americans hail from. You do not take the photograph. You take nothing. You simply step over the body and press on. There is no time to stop and look. No time. Just keep moving. The offensive operates on a strict timetable. Reach the Meuse River in 3 days, capture Antwerp in a week, cleave the Allied armies in two, and compel them to negotiate. It sounds utterly insane when you truly consider it, this ragged, exhausted army that has been in retreat for 2 years, suddenly expected to punch through and win the war. But the element of surprise is undeniably real. The Americans genuinely did not see this coming. And in war sometimes surprise is enough. The first day of the offensive unfolds far better than anyone dared to expect. German forces successfully punch through the American lines at multiple points. Entire units collapse, others surrender outright. Prisoners stream back toward the German rear in numbers you haven't witnessed since the campaigns in France in '40. On the second day, your unit captures an American supply dump, a trove of food, ammunition, and genuine coffee, not the ersatz garbage they've been serving in Germany for years. The men fall upon it like starved wolves, stuffing their pockets, their packs, and their mouths. There are crates of American chocolate bars, sweet, rich, a taste unlike anything you've encountered in years. You devour 3 bars so quickly you almost sicken yourself. A sergeant nearby is avidly stuffing his pockets with Lucky Strike cigarettes, the authentic American kind. If we'd known they had this much, he quips, we'd have attacked sooner. Maybe we should just surrender to their supply depot. No one laughs aloud, but a few men manage tentative smiles, the first smiles you've seen in weeks. Jürgen, remarkably, is grinning. Actually grinning. The first time you've witnessed such an expression from him in months. Maybe they were right, he says, a flicker of hope in his voice. Maybe this actually works. You offer no reply. You have long since learned not to hope. Hope, you know, is a dangerous thing. Hope gets you killed. Thomas is somewhere behind you. His Volkssturm unit has been attached to a regular infantry company. Last you saw, he was still alive, still wearing his oversized father's coat, still clutching that rifle as if it alone might save him. The thick fog persists through the second day, and into the third. The very weather that should be grounding Allied aircraft is, instead, keeping them blind. No fighter bombers scream down on the advancing columns. No strafing runs devastate the supply trucks. Just a vast gray sky, pristine white snow, and German forces advancing for the first time in what feels like an eternity. You push through small villages with unpronounceable names, Belgian places, French places. The civilians hide in their cellars, peering cautiously out through shuttered windows. They've already been liberated, once. Now the Germans are back. They don't know what to think, and neither, frankly, do you. A crucial crossroads town named St. Vith holds out far longer than anticipated, its American defenders dug in and steadfastly refusing to budge. The advance is forced to flow around them, pressing forward and leaving the stubborn pocket to be dealt with later. That is when the true problems begin. The roads become catastrophically clogged. Too many vehicles attempt to use too few routes. Tanks become hopelessly stuck behind supply trucks. Artillery is trapped behind tanks. Everything backs up like blood in a severely blocked artery. And the fuel? My God, the fuel! The tanks require fuel to advance, but the trucks carrying it cannot get through because the tanks themselves are blocking the roads. And even then, there simply isn't enough fuel to begin with. There is never enough fuel. The entire offensive had been planned on the desperate assumption that they would capture American supply dumps en route. Some units do manage to seize fuel, but it's never enough. Never enough. You begin to hear grim stories of panzer columns halting dead in their tracks, entirely out of gas. Crews are abandoning their formidable vehicles, continuing on foot because there is no alternative. The oppressive weather finally breaks on the 23rd. A startling blue sky, clear visibility, and suddenly the air is choked with American planes, Thunderbolts, Mustangs, and heavy bombers. Hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, raining down death on anything that dares to move below. You have never, in your entire life, witnessed so many aircraft. The sky is utterly black with them, like a swarm of locusts, like a devastating plague unleashed by an angry god. The Luftwaffe is supposed to be up there too, you remember, supposedly protecting the ground forces, providing vital air cover. But the Luftwaffe is a mere ghost now. Crippled by fuel shortages, pilot shortages, and aircraft shortages. What few operational planes they still possess cannot possibly challenge the vast armada overhead. The column you are with is caught tragically in the open. No cover, no anti-aircraft defense, just men and vehicles on a road that has transformed into a deadly shooting gallery. The first enemy plane streaks in, low and fast, guns blazing. Its bullets chew mercilessly into the snow, the dirt, and the helpless men who cannot escape. To get out of the way fast enough. One truck erupts in fire, then another follows, turning men into mere debris. Bodies are flung through the air, limp and lifeless as ragdolls. You instinctively hurl yourself into a ditch, pressing your body deep into the icy mud, while overhead the sky fills with the terrifying roar of engines, the relentless chatter of machine guns, and the agonizing screams of those who weren't quick enough to escape. A bomb detonates terrifyingly close, the sheer force of its concussion lifting you violently before slamming you back down onto the frozen earth. Your ears scream with a persistent ringing, a metallic taste of blood fills your mouth, and dirt blinds your eyes. For a fleeting, horrifying moment, you are transported back to Kursk, back to Braschian, back to every single nightmare that has haunted you for the past 2 years. Another pass overhead, bringing more deafening explosions, more cries of terror. A man drags himself past you, his legs nothing but mangled stumps, leaving a crimson trail in the pristine snow. He doesn't make it far. The assault continues for hours, wave after relentless wave. They had clearly been waiting for this moment, meticulously stockpiling bombs, bullets, and a raw, seething rage. Now, they are unleashing every bit of it upon the army that had dared to catch them by surprise. When the relentless fury finally abates, you cautiously crawl out of the ditch, surveying the devastation around you. Half the column smolders, engulfed in flames. Vehicles lie twisted, black in wrecks. Bodies are strewn everywhere. The snow, pristine white just this morning, is now a gruesome red, stained with blood, oil, and the scattered remains of men who ceased to exist mere hours ago. Miraculously, Jurgen is alive, though a deep cut on his forehead bleeds steadily into his eyes. Otherwise, he appears physically intact. An hour later, you discover Thomas sitting motionless against a tree, his gaze fixed on nothing at all. His unit suffered a direct hit. Most of them are gone. The men he trained with, the older grandfathers who once wore business suits, the other young boys in their oversized fathers' coats, all are now scattered across a Belgian field, reduced to fragments too small to ever be identified. He neither speaks nor cries, simply sitting there with that vacant, thousand-yard stare you've witnessed on far too many faces. It's the unmistakable look of someone who has seen an unbearable amount, whose mind has simply shut down as a desperate means to cope. You manage to get him moving, pushing forward. The offensive, against all odds, is supposedly still progressing. The orders, bizarrely, remain unchanged, even as everything else has been irrevocably altered. Christmas arrives, marked by little more than the calendar. You spend it huddled in a bombed-out farmhouse, consuming cold rations, the distant rumble of artillery your only accompaniment. Someone manages to unearth a bottle of wine from the cellar, and it's passed silently from hand to hand. No one speaks of Christmas. No one mentions home. There is simply nothing left to say. The offensive, everyone consents, is slowly bleeding out. The Americans have regrouped, their ranks swelling with reinforcements pouring in from every direction. The bulge in their lines, which lent its name to this desperate battle, is now being ruthlessly compressed from both flanks. German units, once surging forward, are now fighting not for victory, but for their very survival, struggling desperately to avoid being encircled and cut off. Bastogne. That's the name whispered constantly, the focal point of all discussion. A crucial crossroads, it commands access to half the roads in the entire region. American paratroopers, completely surrounded, are defiantly holding out against every assault the Germans launch at them. Surrender, the Germans demand. Nuts, the Americans famously reply. Whatever the hell that means, they hold. Day after day, they cling on. And as they hold, buying precious time, the remainder of the American army consolidates its strength, preparing to launch a decisive counterattack. By the first week of January, you find yourselves retreating once more, retracing your steps through the very same villages you had advanced through only 2 weeks prior. You pass the same burned-out vehicles, the same frozen bodies, the same terrified civilians huddled in their cellars, their eyes pleading, silently questioning when this nightmare will ever truly end. The fuel situation has become utterly catastrophic. Tanks, once formidable, now lie abandoned along the roadside. Artillery pieces are deliberately blown up, ensuring they won't fall into enemy hands. Men march on foot, for there is nothing left to ride. You walk past a Panther tank, sitting incongruously in a field, pristine, not a single scratch marring its formidable armor, yet it is utterly empty out of gas. A 50-ton paperweight, it was supposed to be a key to winning the war. Its crew is long gone, having walked east in search of friendly lines. Whether they found them, you will never know. Thomas now walks beside you, a silent, almost mechanical presence. He hasn't uttered more than 10 words since Christmas. The boy who once wept behind the barracks, the boy who carefully penned a letter to his mother, that boy is gone. What remains is something else entirely. Something empty. You recognize that look. You've seen it reflected in your own eyes in the mirror. Wherever you are lying right now, take a breath. A real one. Deep, slow. Feel your chest rise and fall, that simple, automatic function your body performs without conscious thought. Wilhelm hasn't drawn a breath like that in months. Every breath out here is shallow, tight, held in constant anticipation of death. The Ardennes offensive ultimately cost Germany everything. Every last tank, every remaining plane, every trained soldier they possessed, all were recklessly thrown into this desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort that was supposedly meant to turn the tide of the war. It was meant to prove Germany could still achieve victory. Instead, it proved nothing beyond the fact that Hitler had, irrevocably, lost all touch with reality. You later hear whispers that he blamed the generals. Of course he did. It was always the generals. Never his flawed strategy, never the critical lack of fuel, never the fundamental mathematics that declared this undertaking impossible from the very beginning. Never the simple truth that you cannot win a war through sheer force of will or fervent wishing alone. The General Staff had warned him, repeatedly. They had told him the fuel reserves were depleted, the manpower insufficient, the ammunition non-existent. But he hadn't listened. He never listened. He merely raved about willpower, about destiny, about the inevitable triumph of the German spirit. Willpower, however, does not fill empty gas tanks. Destiny does not deflect bullets. The German spirit, you suspect, had died somewhere around Stalingrad, and no one ever bothered to tell Hitler. The cost: 100,000 German casualties, 800 tanks lost, most of them not to enemy fire, but to mechanical failure or critical fuel shortages. The entire Western strategic reserve was gone, utterly wasted, squandered on a fantasy that was never destined to work. And now, there is truly nothing left. Nothing stands between the advancing Allies and the heart of Germany but exhausted men with empty rifles, clinging to the desperate, flickering hope that perhaps, just perhaps, something might change. But nothing will change. You know that now. You've known it for a long time. The war is a runaway train hurtling towards a cliff, and everyone on board understands it's destined to crash, yet no one can fathom how to bring it to a halt. You cross back into Germany in mid-January, not as a triumphant victor, but merely as a survivor. Just like always. The fatherland appears even more ravaged than when you left it, more ruins, more swarms of refugees, more hollow-eyed people whose belief systems have crumbled, leaving only the primal need for the next meal. Jürgen, too, has fallen silent. None of you speak much anymore. What is there, truly, to say? The war is undeniably lost. It has been for months, perhaps even years. Yet, it grinds on, because no one seems to know how to stop it. To stop means admitting defeat, and admitting defeat means confronting the terrifying unknown that will follow. You find your thoughts drifting to Eric's ring, still nestled in your pocket, still waiting. His wife remains blissfully unaware, still counting the days until spring. Spring. That's 2, maybe 3 months away. Can the war possibly drag on for that long? Can you? You don't know. You can't know. All you do know is that tomorrow, you will wake up and do this all over again. March somewhere, engage in some skirmish, and watch more men die for a cause that lost all semblance of meaning around the time the first bombs started falling. The Eastern Front is collapsing. Rumors swirl, confirming that the Soviets launched a massive offensive while you were preoccupied with losing the Ardennes. They have punched through every defense, reaching the Oder River, a mere 60 kilometers from Berlin. 60 kilometers. That's nothing. A day's drive. Close enough that a determined man could walk there in a week. Berlin, the capital, the very heart of the Reich, the place where all of this began. Now, it appears, it is destined to end there, too. That is where you are headed next. Back east. Back to confront the enemy you've been fleeing for 2 long years. Back to the very beginning. The train car is frigid, the windows shattered, allowing snow to continually blow in through the gaping holes. You huddle deeper into your coat, desperately trying to sleep, trying not to contemplate what horrors await on the other side. The tracks have been bombed so frequently that the train spends more time stationary than moving, constantly waiting for repairs, for fuel, or for someone to ascertain if the bridge ahead is even still standing. You pass through what used to be Leipzig. The station is now a heap of rubble, and the city stretching beyond it is nothing but ruins. Everything is rubble now. Germany has been transformed into a desolate country of shattered remains. Refugees throng the platforms, civilians desperately fleeing west, away from the Soviets, away from whatever unspeakable fate is closing in. Women clutch children, old people carry their meager bundles, the desperate and the terrified all intertwined in a vast tide of human misery. One woman attempts to board the train, a military transport strictly for soldiers. An officer shoves her roughly back onto the platform. She screams something in despair, her child crying inconsolably. The train finally lurches forward, and you watch them recede into the distance, two more anonymous faces swallowed by the crowd of the damned. Thomas sits across from you, his gaze empty, fixed on nothing. His father's coat is now stained with grim realities you dare not think about. He is 15 now, his birthday having passed unnoticed somewhere amidst the chaos, uncelebrated, unacknowledged. He hasn't spoken a single word since the Ardennes. He simply follows orders, marches where he is told, eats when food is available, sleeps when there is time. A ghost inhabiting a boy's face. You've witnessed it before: shell shock, combat fatigue, whatever name it is given. It is the mind's desperate mechanism to protect itself from horrors it cannot possibly process. You cling to the hope that he might someday return, that the boy inside that empty shell is merely hiding, waiting for it to be safe enough to emerge once more. You're not sure it ever will be truly safe again. Jürgen sleeps, or perhaps he only pretends to, his eyes twitching beneath closed lids, bad dreams. Everyone suffers from them now. It is the inevitable price of having survived what you have. The train rattles eastward toward the Oder, toward Berlin, toward whatever remains. Outside the window, the sky is gray. The snow is gray. The entire world, it seems, has turned gray. Even your thoughts have become colorless, empty, simply existing from one moment to the next, devoid of hope, or fear, or anything at all. Happy birthday, kid. Welcome to the end of the world. The Oder River, February 1945. This is it. The last stand. The final line of defense. Behind you lies Berlin, separated by 60 kilometers of flat German countryside, then the capital itself, the very heart of the Reich, the ultimate prize and the reason for this entire war. In front of you is the river, frozen solid in many places. And beyond that, them, the Soviets, millions of them, patiently waiting. The defenses here are utterly pathetic. Trenches haphazardly dug by old men and young children. Machine gun nests crudely fashioned from rubble. Anti-tank obstacles so flimsy that a determined driver could probably push them aside with his bumper. Nothing even remotely resembling the formidable fortifications you once faced at Kursk. Nothing like what a true defensive line should look like. But it is all you have. So you dig in and you wait. The trench is pitifully shallow, barely deep enough to stand upright in. Water continuously seeps up from the bottom, a frozen slush that thoroughly soaks your boots and never, ever quite dries. You've developed frostbite on 3 of your toes, which you can no longer feel. Chances are you never will again. Rations ceased arriving regularly weeks ago. You eat whatever you can find, whatever you can steal, whatever you can barter for. An old woman in a deserted farmhouse once gave you half a loaf of bread in exchange for you not shooting her cow. A fair trade, you reasoned. The cow would have died anyway when the Soviets finally arrived. At night, the cold becomes utterly unbearable. You huddle together with the others for what little warmth you can share, bodies pressed against bodies. All dignity is gone. There is no privacy, only the stark, undeniable drive for survival. It is the same raw instinct that has kept you alive for 3 agonizing years now, the only thing that still reliably functions. Wilhelm, you realize, is 24 now, though you stopped counting birthdays somewhere around the time that counting anything stopped mattering. Your hands sometimes tremble, not from the cold, but from something else entirely. Something nameless, something that resides in the liminal space between sleep and waking. Jürgen is deployed somewhere further down the line, assigned to a different company now. The army constantly shuffles men around, desperately trying to fill gaps, to plug holes, moving pieces on a chessboard that has already been decisively lost. You see him sometimes, exchanging a quick wave. You don't talk much, there's nothing left to say. Thomas is still by your side, still silent. He still wears his father's coat, though it is now utterly falling apart, held together by desperate scraps of wire and strips of cloth. He follows orders, does precisely what he is told, eats when food materializes, sleeps when there is a moment for rest. The boy is utterly gone. What remains is a hollowed-out machine, vaguely shaped like a person. The Soviets probe your flimsy defenses daily. Artillery barrages, small unit attacks. They are testing for weaknesses, meticulously searching for the soft spots. They are in no rush whatsoever. They know exactly what is coming. They have waited years for this moment, and a few more weeks will make no difference to them. The ice on the river is thick, solid enough to walk on, perhaps even thick enough to bear the weight of tanks. The engineers make futile attempts to break it, employing explosives, power saws, anything they can conceive of. It barely makes a dent. The river seems to heal itself overnight, fresh ice effortlessly filling in the gaps. Nature itself now seems to be conspiring against you, alongside everything else. There's a makeshift airfield nearby, and against all logic, planes are still flying. Not many, but some, mostly tank hunters, their purpose to dive onto Soviet armor, desperately trying to delay the inevitable. You watch them depart in the mornings, then anxiously count how many return in the evenings. The numbers never match. One day, a pilot limps back, his plane sputtering on a single engine, trailing a thick plume of smoke. He barely makes it to the strip, crashing hard upon landing. They pull him from the wreckage, his legs savagely torn open, metal fragments embedded everywhere. He repeatedly asks, almost frantically, if he got the tank. Did he get the tank? Yes, someone reassures him gently. You got it. 13 kills today. Lucky 13. He passes out then, a faint smile on his bloodied face. You never know if he ever wakes up. The hangings begin in February. Deserters, cowards, traitors to the Reich, that's what the hastily scrawled signs declare, nailed to the chests of the men left dangling from lamp posts, trees, or any vertical surface capable of supporting a rope. Most of them are just boys, 18, 17, sometimes even younger. Kids who took one look at the hell of the Eastern Front and decided they'd rather chance running than perish in a freezing hole for a cause that ceased to make any sense years ago. They didn't get far. The military police are omnipresent now, relentlessly checking papers, asking pointed questions, searching for anyone unable to precisely explain their destination and purpose. The Feldgendarmerie chain dogs, the soldiers call them, a grim moniker inspired by the metal gorgets they wear around their necks. Dogs on chains, hunting other dogs who have slipped their leashes. Anyone unable to account for themselves ends up swinging from a rope, a damning sign around their neck. You witness a squad of them execute a man right there in the street. No trial, no questions, just a rope tossed over a lamp post, and a man who was likely just trying to find food for his family. The sign simply reads deserter. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. It doesn't matter now. The message is stark and unambiguous. There is no escape. There is no surrender. There are only two options: fighting and dying, or running and dying. Choose wisely. Radio broadcasts blare about something called Werewolf, a partisan network comprised of German civilians who are supposedly ready to continue fighting even after the regular army collapses. Sabotage, assassination, guerrilla warfare against the occupiers, every man, woman, and child, a soldier for the Reich, fighting until ultimate victory or final death. It sounds utterly insane. It is insane, but they are frighteningly serious. The very same individuals who condemn and hang that boy for running are now planning to transform grandmothers into insurgents. Pour encourager les autres. That's what the French say, to encourage the others, to serve as a brutal reminder to all observers of what happens when one ceases to believe in ultimate victory. You pass one of these grim spectacles on your way to the latrine. A boy, perhaps 16, his face an unnatural purple, his tongue swollen, eyes bulging grotesquely. A sign proclaiming coward in big, black letters is nailed to his chest. He's wearing a Volkssturm armband, one of the people's soldiers, one of the grandfathers and children who were supposed to save Germany. He probably bolted after his first artillery barrage, likely didn't even make it a kilometer before the chain dogs caught him. Thomas actually looks at him. It's the first time he's truly focused on anything in weeks. Something flickers in his eyes, recognition, perhaps. Or understanding. Asterisk, that could be us. Asterisk, you realize it could be any of you. The sole distinction between the boy dangling from the rope and the boys shivering in the trenches is nothing but luck. Pure, arbitrary luck. And luck, you know, always runs out eventually. For everyone. March arrives, bringing with it a subtle shift in the weather, a whisper of false spring. The ice on the UDA, a frozen barrier, starts to thin. The Soviet pressure intensifies, an unyielding vice. They're getting ready, everyone knows it. The colossal push is coming. News filters down from headquarters, a torrent of information that is both confusing and maddeningly contradictory. The Führer, they say, has a plan. The Führer will surely save us. New orders are perpetually on the way. Hold at all costs. But hold what? With what dwindling resources? You might have 50 rounds of ammunition left. The machine gun in your section has been a silent, stubborn relic for days. Half the men in your unit are Volkssturm, hastily conscripted, armed with hunting rifles, and barely 2 weeks of training under their belts. Yet you hold, for what other choice is there? To run away and suffer the fate of the boy on the lamppost? To surrender and pray for Soviet mercy, a commodity in short supply? Neither path promises a favorable outcome. Then, the infamous Nero decree descends, an order of chilling clarity issued on March 19th, from the Führer himself. Destroy everything. Every factory, every bridge, every rail line, every warehouse, every vital water treatment plant, every electrical station, anything and everything the enemy might possibly use once they conquer Germany, which, the order implicitly acknowledges, they soon will. The underlying logic is nothing short of insane. If Germany cannot triumph, then Germany must utterly cease to exist. Not merely its government or its army, but the very country itself, its people, the intricate infrastructure that sustains their lives. All of it to be obliterated by German hands before the Allies can even lay claim to it. If the war is lost, then the people are lost too, is what Hitler had declared. There is no point in preserving anything for a populace too weak, too cowardly, to fight for their fatherland. Let them starve amidst the ruins. Let them freeze in the rubble. They deserve this desolation for having failed him. The very man who callously dispatched millions to die in foreign lands now wishes to exterminate those who remained at home. It is the final solution, now expanded to encompass everyone. You hear the officers discussing it in hushed, horrified tones. Some are visibly shaken, their faces ashen, their hands trembling with disbelief and despair. This is their country, after all, their families reside here, their children destined to inherit whatever remains. Others simply shrug with a weary indifference. What difference does it make now, they seem to ask? The relentless Allied bombs have already reduced most of it to dust. The Soviets will undoubtedly finish the job. What is one more monstrous order in a war that has been an endless cascade of senseless commands from its very inception? Local party officials, with unsettling efficiency, begin to organize demolition teams. Bridges are meticulously wired with explosives, their supports prepped for collapse. Factory equipment is systematically smashed with sledgehammers. Vast grain stores, the sustenance of entire communities, are doused with gasoline and set ablaze, the flames devouring decades of harvest. Train tracks are violently torn up, power lines severed, main water pipes deliberately fractured. Anything that might conceivably offer assistance or solace to anyone attempting to survive the coming occupation is ruthlessly destroyed. An old farmer stands by, his gaze fixed as they ignite his grain silo. 40 years of arduous labor, his entire life savings distilled into wheat, rye, and barley, now ascend in a column of smoke and fire, all because a deranged man hidden deep in a bunker decided that if he could not possess Germany, then no one else could either. The farmer, a figure of profound sorrow, sheds no tears. He simply stands there, a silent sentinel, watching the destruction of his life's work. His face is utterly blank, an empty canvas beyond grief, beyond all discernible emotion. Consider that thought for a moment. Wherever you are right now, whatever surface supports you, someone, somewhere, toiled their entire life to meticulously construct something of value, only for another to deliberately incinerate it, driven by a perverse need to ensure that no one else could ever possess it. That, you realize, is the true face of the end. It doesn't arrive with a grand cataclysmic bang, but with the quiet, devastating act of arson, fueled by pure, malicious spite. Amidst this orchestrated madness, some engineers quietly refuse to comply. They fail to demolish the bridges they were explicitly ordered to destroy. They neglect to obliterate the factory equipment they were supposed to render useless. These are small, desperate acts of defiance, flickering embers of humanity that might, just might, preserve a few lives when this nightmare finally concludes. Albert Speer, the Minister of Armaments, the very man tasked with implementing the monstrous decree, is rumored to be actively sabotaging his own orders. They say he's covertly instructing local officials to ignore the destruction mandates, striving to preserve whatever he can for the suffering populace who will one day have to rebuild. If any of these brave, defiant individuals are caught, their fate is certain. They will hang like deserters, signs around their necks branding them traitors. Yet they persist, because someone must. Because the war is unequivocally lost, and there is no conceivable point in utterly destroying the paltry remains. You never learn if any of them are apprehended. You are far too preoccupied with the all-consuming struggle for your own survival. April arrives, and with it, the Soviets unleash their long-anticipated offensive. 2.5 million men, 6,000 tanks, 40,000 artillery pieces, the largest concentration of sheer firepower in the annals of human history, all inexorably aimed directly at Berlin. The bombardment commences even before the first hint of dawn, a cataclysmic symphony of destruction that makes the Battle of Kursk seem like mere target practice, and Operation Bagration feel like a gentle warm-up. The very earth itself appears to rend asunder. It is fire and thunder and the visceral, absolute end of the world. You press yourself desperately into the mud at the bottom of your trench, feeling the entire universe shudder beneath you. Shells land with such terrifying proximity that their concussions lift your body clear off the ground. Dirt, shrapnel, and pulverized debris rain down endlessly. Men scream, men die, men simply cease to exist in blinding flashes of light and deafening roars of noise. The Oder line, that supposedly impregnable defensive barrier, somehow holds for approximately 3 agonizing days. Then it doesn't. The breakthrough occurs just north of your position, a gaping wound in the front. Soviet tanks, a relentless tide of steel, pour through a gap that, by all tactical logic, should not, could not, possibly exist. The defensive line that was solemnly promised to hold until reinforcements arrived, until the fabled wonder weapons miraculously saved everyone, until something, anything, materialized to stem the tide, it is gone. Erased in 3 days, as if it had never been there at all. From your shattered position, you watch the relentless advance, endless columns of T-34 tanks, a torrent of steel, rolling inexorably west. Behind them, trucks brim with infantrymen, then artillery pieces rumble forward, and behind those, yet more tanks. It is an army of such staggering vastness that it takes hours, an eternity, for it to pass. Hours of watching the very end of everything you have ever fought for crawl by on treads and wheels. No one issues an order to counterattack. There is nothing left to counterattack with. No one gives the command to hold. There is literally nothing left to hold. For a while, no orders are given at all. The chain of command, the very spine of your fighting force, has fractured and broken down completely. Then, eventually, the inevitable orders arrive: fall back, regroup, establish new defensive positions. They are the same weary commands you have been hearing for too long, grinding years. The same endless retreat you have been fighting, inch by bloody inch, since the catastrophe at Kursk. But this time, there is nowhere left to retreat to. Behind you lies Berlin, the besieged heart of the Reich. And that is where you are going, whether you desire it or not. The roads are a maelstrom of chaos, military vehicles and desperate civilian refugees hopelessly intertwined. Soldiers, children, and old women pushing handcarts laden with whatever meager possessions they could snatch before fleeing, all driven by the same imperative, moving west, away from the relentless Soviets, towards some elusive promise of safety. You pass a family on the road, a mother, a father, and 3 children, struggling to push a cart piled high with salvaged furniture, clothing, and incongruously, a bird cage with a bright yellow canary inside. The bird is singing. Actually singing. In the very heart of all this death and destruction, a tiny yellow bird, its song a defiant melody, trapped in a cage on a road to nowhere. The father catches your gaze, offers a weary shrug. She likes the movement, he says, his voice flat. Thinks we're going somewhere nice. You find no words to respond, so you say nothing, simply pressing onward. Soviet aircraft sweep low, strafing the columns, a sight you have witnessed far too many times. You dive for whatever cover you can find, wait for the deadly pass to end, count the newly fallen bodies, then force yourself to keep moving. The family with the bird cage isn't so lucky. You do not look back. You cannot look back. Looking back is how you stop moving. And stopping out here is how you die. Thomas moves alongside you, still silent, still eerily mechanical. But something profound has shifted in his eyes. It isn't fear, not precisely. It's something else entirely. Resignation, perhaps, or a stark, immutable acceptance. The look of someone who has finally comprehended the end, and has ceased to fight against it. You find Jürgen at a desolate crossroads, just outside a village whose name you can't recall. His unit, he explains, was utterly decimated in the breakthrough, chewed up and spat out by the Soviet tide. He is one of perhaps a dozen survivors, his arm crudely bandaged, the dirty cloth already soaked through with fresh blood. Getting the band back together, he says, his voice unnervingly flat, devoid of any genuine humor, just hollow words. Looks like it, you reply, the grim reality hanging heavy between you. Berlin. Yeah, he confirms. The 3 of you fall into step, walking together, the same as before, the same as always. Except now, the relentless march of the war is measured in days instead of months, in hours instead of weeks. Everything is accelerating, happening far too rapidly to process, too quickly to comprehend. On the horizon, the city itself finally becomes visible, a dark, bruised silhouette against the sky. Smoke billows from a dozen raging fires, an ominous testament to its ongoing agony. Even from this distance, the ceaseless thud of artillery reaches you, a distant, relentless thunder that never ceases. Your thoughts drift to Eric's ring, still resting in your pocket, its weight now impossibly heavy, far heavier than a mere piece of metal should be. You made a solemn promise: find his wife, tell her what happened, give her the ring. Munich, however, lies in the opposite direction, almost certainly behind Allied lines by now. Even if you somehow survive the inferno of Berlin, you might never have the chance to keep that sacred vow. But you will try. That, you realize, is all you can do. Try to survive. Try to find her. Try to make something, anything, mean something in a war that ceased to hold any meaning a very long time ago. The road to Berlin stretches ahead, a scarred and brutal testament to utter defeat. It is cratered, bombed, and lined with the skeletal wreckage of an army and a nation that recklessly wagered everything on a madman's delusional dream, and lost catastrophically. Burned-out vehicles appear every few meters, hulks of twisted metal. Bodies lie in the ditches, some clearly soldiers, others civilians, some so terribly mangled it's impossible to discern the difference. The pervasive smell is everywhere now, a sickening cocktail: death, smoke, and something else, desperation, perhaps, or fear rendered physical. You pass a Volkssturm unit, marching in the opposite direction, toward the very front you are fleeing. Old men and boys, their meager armbands proudly displayed, clutching their hunting rifles, walking with doomed determination toward the enemy. Some of them look openly scared, their faces pale. Others carry a look of weary resignation. A few, chillingly, appear almost eager, true believers to the very end. They will be dead by tomorrow, most of them anyway. You don't voice that grim certainty. You don't say anything at all. You just keep walking. Thomas walks on your left, Jürgen on your right. 3 men who began as complete strangers and have, through unimaginable shared suffering, become whatever this is. Brothers, perhaps, or something akin to it, irrevocably bound together by a common horror and an indomitable, stubborn refusal to simply die. You think again of Eric's ring, its metallic weight a constant, heavy reminder in your pocket. The promise you made 2 years ago in a shell crater, a moment that now feels like 2 centuries past. Find his wife. Tell her what happened. Tell her he kept his promise. Tell her he was coming home. Spring, he had whispered, his last breath. I promised her spring. It is April now. Spring has indeed arrived, a cruel, vibrant explosion of life. Flowers are blooming defiantly even in the crumbling ruins, life stubbornly asserting itself despite the pervasive destruction. Eric should be home by now, should be holding his wife, should be starting the family he so desperately dreamed about. Instead, he lies buried somewhere in Belarus, if he was even afforded the dignity of a burial at all. And you are here, walking relentlessly toward Berlin, his ring in your pocket, with seemingly no way to fulfill the promise you made. But you will try. If you somehow survive what is coming, if there is anything at all left when this hell finally ends, you will find her somehow. Not yet, though. Not today. Berlin is waiting. The last battle. The absolute, undeniable end of everything. You keep walking. Berlin. Late April 1945. The city is dying. You can hear its final, rasping breaths, feel its tremors, smell its putrefaction in every agonizing breath you take. Brick dust, the acrid tang of cordite, and the sickening sweetness of rotting flesh, the grim perfume of the end times. You are holed up in a damp cellar somewhere in what used to be the eastern suburbs, now merely a vast expanse of rubble punctuated by the occasional jagged wall. Streets, as they once were, no longer exist. Buildings are reduced to broken teeth jutting from smoking, diseased gums. The Soviets are mere blocks away. You can distinctly hear the ominous rumble of their tanks grinding through the ruins, the relentless pounding of their artillery obliterating what little remains of the German positions. Their soldiers shout in a harsh, guttural language you still don't understand, but have learned, with chilling certainty, to fear. Wilhelm is still alive, somehow. 24 years old, yet 1,000 years tired, his spirit utterly drained. Jürgen is with you, his arm wound now terribly septic. Angry red lines spiderweb from beneath the dirty bandage, creeping inexorably toward his shoulder. He desperately needs a hospital, medicine, things that simply do not exist in Berlin anymore, things that perhaps no longer exist anywhere in Germany. He knows it too. You see it clearly in his eyes, the quiet acceptance, the profound understanding that this, very likely, is where his story culminates. Thomas is still here, still silent, still unnervingly mechanical, but he is fighting now. And that, you realize, is something. Whatever shattered within him during the brutal winter in the Ardennes has somehow reassembled itself into something grimly functional. He is no longer the boy who wept behind the barracks, nor the eager child who lied about his age to serve his country. He is something else, something forged in unyielding hardship, something harder. He will survive this, you think? If anyone at all survives this, Thomas will. He is too young to die, too stubbornly resilient, too utterly emptied of everything that might make dying easy. The orders, issued from some distant, detached bunker, ceased making any coherent sense days ago. Hold this street. Fall back to that building. Counterattack toward the bridge. But there is no recognizable street. There is no intact building. There is no bridge that hasn't already crumbled into the river. There are only ruins, and more ruins, stretching endlessly in every direction, an apocalyptic panorama of destruction. Yet you fight anyway, because what other choice remains? Because to stop is to die. Because after 3 unrelenting years of war, your body has forgotten how to perform any action other than to fight, to run, and to hide. It's a brutal, relentless struggle, house to house, room to room, sometimes resorting to desperate hand-to-hand combat when the precious ammunition finally runs out, and all you have left is a rifle butt and the raw, desperate strength of a man who simply refuses to die. You clear a building, or attempt to, kicking in a door, tossing in a grenade if you're lucky enough to have one, rushing in, firing wildly if you don't. Every single room is a potential death trap. Every dark corner conceals an ambush waiting to spring. A Soviet soldier rounds a corner, and you instinctively shoot him. He falls. Another appears right behind him. You shoot that one too. A third, perhaps with a final desperate gasp, throws a grenade. You dive behind a pile of unstable rubble, shielding yourself just as the explosion erupts, showering you with a stinging rain of brick fragments and dust. Your ears ring deafeningly. Your hands tremble uncontrollably. Still, you keep fighting. In one apartment, amidst the squalor and the stench of decay, you stumble upon a family hiding in a cramped closet. A mother, a father, two small children, civilians, tragically caught in the brutal crossfire. They scream, a raw, primal sound of terror, when they see you, convinced you've come to kill them. You're not going to kill them. You're barely capable of killing anyone anymore. Your hands are shaking so violently you can scarcely aim your rifle. Go, you rasp, your voice hoarse. Basement. Stay there until it's over. They don't move, paralyzed by fear and shock. The mother clutches her children to her chest with a desperate, fierce grip, as if her own fragile body could shield them from bullets. Perhaps she can. Mothers, you vaguely recall, are capable of truly impossible things. You leave them there, unable to help, unable to save. You keep moving. Don't look back. Looking back is how you die. Looking back is how you remember you are human. And humans, you realize with a cold clarity, were never made for this. This is what it has come to. The so-called master race, the envisioned thousand-year Reich, now reduced to fighting in damp cellars and crumbling stairwells for a city that is already irrevocably lost. Dying one by one, two by two, for a leader who cowers deep within a bunker somewhere beneath the ruins, utterly refusing to confront the monstrous consequences of his own actions. April 25th. The Soviets, with grim determination, finally reached the Reichstag, the parliament building, that potent symbol of German democracy which Hitler had so infamously burned 30 years prior, and never deigned to rebuild. Now, they are triumphantly raising their flag over its battered ruins. You are not there to witness this historic moment. You are 3 agonizing kilometers away, huddled in the shattered shell of what was once an apartment building, watching Jürgen's condition deteriorate with every passing hour. His fever is climbing relentlessly, his words now a nonsensical jumble. He's speaking to people who aren't there, his mother, his sister, a girl he knew from school, flickering fragments of a life that existed before all this, before the war ruthlessly devoured everything. Stay with me, you plead with him, your voice ragged. We're almost through. Just hold on. He looks at you with eyes that don't quite focus, a distant haze clouding them. Is it spring? He asks, his voice barely a whisper. I promised someone spring. It's Eric's line, Eric's promise. But you don't correct him. You simply nod. It's spring, you confirm, the lie catching in your throat. April, almost May. Good, he breathes, a faint smile touching his lips. That's good. He dies that night. Quietly, peacefully almost. His breathing simply ceases. One moment he is there, a fading presence, and the next, he is not. You sit with his body for a while, lost to time, unable to process the new emptiness. The incessant fighting continues somewhere outside, a distant, brutal soundtrack, shells falling, guns firing, the city tearing itself apart. Thomas finds you in the morning? He says nothing, just looks at Jürgen's still form, then at you, at the desperate way you're clutching your rifle as if it's the only thing anchoring you to the earth. We have to move, he says, the first complete words he has spoken in weeks. His voice is rusty, hoarse, but unmistakably there. Yeah, you respond, numbly. Yeah. Okay. You don't bury Jürgen. You can't. There's no time, no tools, no patch of ground that isn't solid concrete or churned rubble. You simply leave him there, in the abandoned apartment building, the dust slowly settling around him like a final, gray blanket. Another anonymous body in a city overflowing with them. Another grim statistic in a war measured only by statistics. April 30th. The rumor, an almost tangible thing, spreads through the shattered lines like wildfire: the Führer is dead. Shot himself in his bunker, they say, taking the ultimate coward's way out, abandoning everyone else to face the horrifying, inevitable consequences. Some of the men weep openly, true believers to the bitter, final end. Others, however, merely shrug, their faces etched with a profound, weary cynicism. What difference does it make now? They seem to ask. He was never going to save them. Was never. The grand delusion of a miraculous victory had vanished. He had been, in truth, nothing more than a delusional madman, possessing a disturbing gift for rhetoric and an uncanny talent for swaying countless individuals to willingly sacrifice their lives for his cause. Yet the fighting continued, a senseless, grinding agony. No one issued the command to cease, and the very concept of who held authority had dissolved into confusion. So you simply fought on, driven by instinct and the grim reality that it was the only existence you now understood. As May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd bled into one another, the Soviet news tightened inexorably. They advanced, block by agonizing block, building by battered building, room by claustrophobic room. The remaining defenders were relentlessly pushed back, cornered, until there remained no further ground to yield. On May 4th, you surrender? It is not a dramatic or heroic act, but a quiet, desperate one. You simply emerge from a dank cellar, hands raised, praying that the Soviet soldier whose rifle is aimed squarely at you is inclined towards mercy. He is. Or perhaps, he is simply exhausted by the endless cycle of killing. Regardless, he does not fire. He merely gestures with his weapon. March! He grunts. Thomas, too, surrenders beside you. The two of you, a mere remnant of all the comrades and friends you once knew, walk into captivity, swallowed by a vast, silent crowd of other hollow-eyed men who mirror the very exhaustion and emptiness you feel. The Soviets line you up, systematically stripping you of your weapons, your watches, anything deemed valuable. Eric's ring, however, remains safely hidden in your boot. They don't discover it. A small yet profound miracle. On May 7th, Germany surrenders unconditionally. The war, a monstrous conflict that had dragged on for what felt like months, indeed, perhaps even years, is finally, officially over. The relentless shooting ceases. The dying stops. Everything, quite simply, comes to a halt. You are in a holding camp, somewhere east of Berlin, when the news reaches you. A makeshift pen, crammed with German prisoners, waiting in a limbo of uncertainty to learn their fate, whether they will be shot, shipped further east, released, or simply left to rot. Nobody knows. Nobody offers any answers. The war is over, a Soviet political commissar announces, his voice echoing across the crowd of prisoners. Your Reich is finished. Your Führer is dead. Germany, as you knew it, no longer exists. He pronounces these words as if they should wound, as if you should grieve. Perhaps some of the other men do. But you feel only an overwhelming emptiness, a deep, hollowed-out void where a person once resided. The ensuing weeks blur into an indistinguishable haze of endless processing, relentless interrogation, and yet more bureaucratic forms you neither understand nor can answer. Soviet bureaucracy, it seems, grinds forward with a cold, impersonal force as unstoppable as their tanks had been. Somewhere amidst this chaotic machinery, Thomas is separated from you, different camps, different processing centers. You never see him again. You carry a quiet hope that he survived, that the young man who endured the Ardennes and Berlin somehow found his way back home in the end. But you will never know his fate for sure. They release you in July? You walk out through the camp gates with nothing but the threadbare clothes on your back and a pair of worn-out boots, within which still rests a dead man's wedding ring. The Germany you re-enter is utterly unrecognizable. The country you departed 3 years prior has simply ceased to exist. Cities are reduced to desolate fields of rubble. People dwell in makeshift cellars and basements, and refugees swarm everywhere. No one knows where their loved ones are, or where anyone is, for that matter. No one truly knows anything, except for the bewildering, persistent truth that life, somehow, continues even after the world as they knew it has ended. For weeks you walk, eating whatever scraps you can forage, sleeping wherever exhaustion overtakes you. You stop everyone you meet asking, "Have you seen this woman? A baker's wife from Munich. Her name was." You realize you don't actually know her name. Eric had never told you, simply referring to her as his wife, his love, his very reason for enduring. It takes 3 agonizing months, but you find her. She is now living amidst the shattered ruins of Munich, what remains of it, a cellar that was once a vibrant bakery, before the bombs fell, before the war consumed everything. Her name is Anna. She knows, even before you utter a single word. She sees it in your weary face, in the small, significant ring you hold out to her, in the way your gaze struggles to meet hers. "He made me promise," you begin, your voice rough, "to find you, to tell you what happened, to give you this." She takes the ring, cradles it in her palm, and stares at it for what feels like an eternity. "He said he'd be home by spring," she says, her voice disturbingly steady, hollowed out. She has clearly practiced this moment, braced herself for its arrival, much like a soldier prepares for an inevitable battle, dreading it, yet readying themselves nonetheless. "He tried," you tell her, the words a desperate comfort. "He wanted to return more than anything. He spoke of you every single day. He wrote you letters, countless letters, even when there was absolutely no way to send them. He loved you until the very last moment. He truly loved you." You tell her about those letters, the ones he diligently penned but never mailed, the ones he was forced to burn during the desperate retreat from Kursk, the ones that, towards the end, existed only within the confines of his weary mind. Words, countless words, meant for a woman he wasn't even certain he would ever lay eyes on again. You speak of the way he constantly talked about her, about the beautiful life they had planned, the bakery they would run together, the children they would raise, the garden where he so longed to plant tomatoes. He was, you recall, remarkably specific about those tomatoes. She almost smiles at that. Almost. "He was a good man," she says, her voice soft. "Better than he ever realized, better than this war deserved." "Yes," you confirm. "He was." She invites you to stay the night. There's room in the cellar, and a blanket she can spare. It is more comfort than you've known in months. You accept. That night you lie awake amidst the quiet ruins of the bakery, listening as the fractured city slowly settles around you. You hear the sounds of people surviving, cooking, talking, crying, simply living. The sounds of a world stubbornly refusing to end, even when everything around it screamed for its demise. In the room next door, Anna weeps, muffled sobs she attempts to suppress so you won't hear. But you hear anyway. You lie there in the oppressive darkness and allow her to grieve. And you allow yourself to grieve, too. For Eric, for Jürgen, for Thomas, for the baker from Munich, for the pilot who fell from the sky, and for all the other countless men who became ghosts somewhere along that brutal path. The war had stolen so much from everyone, from the entire damn world. But not everything. Not this quiet moment. Not the ring now resting on Anna's finger, nor the solemn promise you had fulfilled, nor the simple, undeniable fact that you are still breathing. That, you realize, has to mean something. Even if you don't yet know precisely what. In the morning, she prepares you a substitute coffee from some carefully hidden supply. It tastes like burnt acorns, bitter and strange, yet it is the best thing you've had in months. "Thank you," she says, her voice soft but clear. "For keeping your promise, for coming all this way, for not forgetting him." You find yourself without words. So you simply stand there, two strangers inextricably bound by a dead man and a war that annihilated everything it touched. "Spring," she murmurs. "He promised me spring." Your mind drifts to all the springs that had come and gone while you were fighting, the brutal springs at Kursk, at Bayonne, in the Ardennes, at Berlin. Springs that had meant nothing more than longer days and warmer nights in which to continue dying. But this spring is different. The war is truly over. The killing has ceased. And somewhere, beneath the layers of rubble and ash and pervasive grief, life is tentatively beginning anew. Delicate flowers push their way through cracks in the shattered concrete. Birds sing their defiant songs amidst the ruins. The world, it seems, is slowly remembering how to exist without constantly burning. Eric would have adored this spring. He would have spent it in the garden he so often dreamed of, teaching his children how to plant vegetables, growing old gracefully beside the woman he loved. He never got that. None of them did. The millions who perished for a madman's delusion. The boys who were turned into soldiers. The soldiers who became corpses. The corpses that were ultimately reduced to mere statistics in the cold pages of history books. But you, somehow, against all conceivable odds, survived. Through Stalingrad and Kursk, through Bayern and the Bulge and Berlin. Through every single horror the war could hurl your way. And now you stand here, in the broken ruins of a Munich bakery, watching a widow gently hold her husband's ring, fulfilling a promise you whispered in a shell crater 2 long years ago. That, you understand, means something profound. You're not entirely sure what, but undeniably something. A few days later, you depart Munich, turning north towards Hamburg, towards whatever faint semblance of home might still exist, towards a life you will have to painstakingly rebuild from scratch, just like everyone else. The ring remains with Anna, where it belongs. The promise has been kept, the dead honored. The war is, finally, truly over. You walk through the decimated country, a nation once proclaimed to last 1,000 years, yet failing to endure even 13. You pass burned-out cities and silent, empty villages, past graveyards that seem to stretch from here all the way to Moscow. You walk past all the grim monuments to human cruelty, to human stubbornness, and to the terrible, unforgivable things people do when they are absolutely convinced of their own righteousness. And somehow, despite the overwhelming desolation, you keep moving forward. One foot in front of the other. The same rhythm as always, the same as it has been since the very beginning. Except now, there is no enemy pursuing you. No orders to obey, no war to fight. Just a long, silent road home, and the rest of your life stretching before you, in which to finally comprehend what any of it truly meant. The summer sun is warm upon your face, the first warmth that has felt truly good in years. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sensation wash over you, letting yourself feel something other than fear for the first time in longer than you can possibly recall. You are alive, against all odds, against all reason, you are alive. And tonight, wherever you are, safe in your own bed with your pillow beneath your head and your blanket pulled up close, you are alive, too. Warm and secure, far removed from all the unimaginable horrors that men inflict upon one another. The war ended 80 years ago. The soldiers who fought it are almost all gone now. But their stories endure. Their struggles and their sacrifices, their desperate, unwavering hope that somehow, things could be different. Maybe they can. Perhaps, that is the entire point. Sleep now. Let the story settle. Let its profound weight sink deep into your bones, where it truly belongs. Tomorrow is another day, another chance, another spring, just as Eric had once promised.